Please.
Albertson. Johnson.
Here.
Stonebarger.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
McGuire. Arnold. And Mr. Bill Johnson is absent.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the August 5th, 2015 minutes. I need a motion and a second. Motion by Mr. Albertson, second by Mrs. Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is applicant seeks a conditional use approval and currently appeals the terms of the zoning ordinance to allow for the rebuilding of an existing non-conforming structure in the C1 commercial zone at 209 First Avenue Southwest.
Correct. This is application owner is Brian Brandwright, doing business as 81 Welding Incorporated. Applicant was submitted requesting ability to rebuild the existing non-conforming structure, single-family dwelling located in the C1 Community District in the event of casualty pursuant to the terms of 21-2403-27. And as the property is here, I'm gonna turn the zoning on for a little bit. And this is the C1 section. It's adjacent to the R2 section here. All these properties across here, well, actually, this whole side of the block is still all residential use except for the parking lot for Second Street. Again, they're in the process of trying to sell this to a party, and the banking is what's requiring the variance to go through, so.
Thank you, Ken. This is an area across the street is R2A, which is an R2 zone that we modified over the last 10 years for smaller lots. I assume the reason this particular block wasn't included in that R2A is we felt that there was some issues in there. Somebody might have had a commercial business, something like that. But that block was not included in the R2A rezoning years ago. Mortgagees generally have a problem with this, that when they go to get their title insurance and get a mortgage on it, that our zoning ordinance says if it burns down or is a total loss, they can't rebuild it because it's a residential use in a commercial zone. What they're asking for is a variance so that if in fact it were destroyed, it could be rebuilt. That way it's a mortgageable property, correct?
Correct.
All right. Anyone here to speak on behalf of this? For or against? I'll open the public hearing.
And it was public notice. All public notice requirements have been met, and nobody has contacted us pro or con to the issue.
And I did talk to Mr. Brandwright today. He couldn't make it, and I told him if there's any issues, we'd table it until he could be here. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McGuire.
Second.
Second by Mr. Stonebarger. Any further discussion on it? Seeing none, ask for, go ahead.
I'd like to look at, our options of rezoning that to R2A with all those home properties there. They're all gonna be in the same boat if they ever went to sell their property.
We could take, what's the one with the large roof there? Is that a commercial use?
Well, this is an apartment, and this is an apartment. I think the rest of these are pretty much, well, this is also an apartment.
So they would be required to be R3.
Some of them would be.
Right there, and probably why it wasn't done is we'd have to cut out an area for R2 because we couldn't blanket it as R2A because of the multifamily use there.
I'd hate to see it hold up the condition of this thing, but we'd be happy to look into it
Yeah.
and give you a better detail. of
We,
what
we,
other
we could look
businesses
we
are-
could look back at that. It's probably been 6 or 7 years since we
Yeah.
took a look at that. We can look at that part of town again. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any old business?
Nope.
Seeing none, ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Stonebarger. Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, let me know when you're ready, Jeff.
All right, go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. I'd like to open up the Thursday, August 20th, 2015 Plan Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Council Liaison Albertson. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Stonebarger.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
McGuire. Here. Arnold. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item number 2, is approval of the minutes from the July 23rd, 2015 meeting. Motion and second.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarg. Anybody going to work down on that end? Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Third item on the agenda is the Eastwoods 19th Edition zoning.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, as you guys remember, this was brought forward last month, in front of you. Last month, it was brought forward as an annexation and an R3 zoning designation. At that meeting, you guys voted to approve the annexation, but denied the R3 zoning designation. So this month, they came back and reapplied to zone this property R2 Single Family Attached Residential District. As you can see from the zoning map, it's adjacent to R3 on the east side, and then there's ag land that separates it from R1 on the south and west side, and then it's still county to the north. This lot is approximately 3.2 acres, which well meets and exceeds the size requirements for the R2 zoning, and this property, when it's platted, could be platted into 6 conforming R2 lots. So with that, I'll let you guys open the public hearing.
Thank you, Jeff. So they're going to bring it in. We're going to ask for a zoning of R2. We don't have any, it's just going to be one lot. Are they going to plat this? They're going to come back in to plat it as 3 lots?
I would imagine that they would come back at some date and plat it when they're ready to develop it. Of course, before you have a building right, it has to be platted, so it has to be platted at some point. We haven't seen that plat yet, but it would range from 1 to 6 lots, depending on what they want to develop.
In the process for the platting, does the plat come back before us again? Or can that be done administratively inside the office?
This one, the last plat did dedicate 7 feet of right-of-way, and they did that because 14th Avenue is a collector route. And since 14th is still a collector route, when that plat comes forward, I would assume they're dedicating right-of-way. And anything that dedicates right-of-way, any plat that dedicates right-of-way must come.
We'll come back before this
Yep.
body one more time to approve the actual plat, and that would be the lot size and lot directions.
Yep.
And then, Ken, at the time when the plat comes in and the lots are there, the only issue I have, one of the issues I have is ingress and egress on a 14th Avenue. It's going to be a pretty heavy collector route one day. We want as few ingress and egress spots as possible. Does that come before you when you issue the building permit, or will we see the ingress and egress on the plat?
That will be a plat issue.
So we'll be able to take a look at ingress and egress at the time of platting as to how it's going to be
Correct.
configured.
Yep.
Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone has anything to speak in regard to the annexation. I'm sorry, zoning. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. Jim Woolen. I live at 1348 22nd Street Northeast. My concern here is that it's just still a big unknown. We were, the R3 over on the other side there kind of slipped in without any existing residents having any knowledge of it because of the city property and the developer's property. All those people that are living there now in their single-family homes were unaware that that was coming in. So they slipped that one in. We've got apartments there now. 4-plexes, 6-plexes. They're nice-looking buildings today. What they'll look like in 20 years, I don't know. We were real concerned about 54 families being shoehorned into that little spot there when Costello had their plan. And we're worried that now 12 4-plexes going there, we got the same thing. We've got 48 families going in there. So my concern is that with no plat here yet, no plan as to what they want to do with that we're going to be looking at another complex of big buildings and several additional families in that little area.
From a procedural standpoint, what we do at the Plan Commission is we basically look at the layout of the land, the dirt that's there, and we take a look at the zoning side of it. What we generally try to do is we'll have R1, which is single-family zoning, and as you move to the more dense areas, say a commercial area, we'll buffer it with R2, which is what you have buffered around there. And then you'll put R3, a little higher density, further away from those R1 dwellings, exactly like what you see right there, and closer to those collector streets. So from our standpoint, we still have one more look at this, and that's at the time of platting. That's why I asked for an explanation of how the platting works. What happens is, at this point, we either say yay or nay on the zoning that it makes sense that that piece of ground would be zoned R2. Is that consistent with what we've done in the rest of town? And can we stand on the consistency of what we've done and the precedence of what we've set before? And so that's what we'll do today, is we'll look and say, it makes sense that that would be R2 or it wouldn't. Last time we said, doesn't make sense for R3 right there because there is no R2 buffer between the R1 and R2 that's consistently done in urban planning. And in this case, there will be one more time where we'll approve the plat. We'll look at those plats as to how they lay the lots out. When the plats come in, we'll make sure that those lots are above the minimum size that our city states in their codes as to how big of a lot, how big of a building the lot can carry, basically, in that zoning. And then we'll also take a look. That's why I had a question on ingress and egresses. How is this going to be laid out? We'll be able to see how the lots are laid out to make sure that they're consistent with what we've done in the past. And then when the building permit, that's another phase that comes through Ken. Ken will look at the building permit, and he'll look on that building permit to make sure they've abided by all the setbacks and the density inside there. So for us, we can't really at the time of zoning say, developer, you need to show us what the buildings are going to look like, how many they're going to be, how close they're going to be together. We can't really do that at the zoning stage. We can only zone it, and then when we come into the platting stage, we have one more set of checks and balances, and then at the building permit stage, we have one more set of checks and balances to make sure that it works. Can you tell us, the biggest problem I think the people have up here is they want to make sure that whatever goes in here conforms with the neighborhood. We say that all the time in the Plan Commission, that we want to make sure that we see it a lot more with neighborhood commercial than we do with R2, but we want to make sure that their buildings conform with the integrity of the neighborhood. How does that play in when you issue a building permit?
Well, it's still just, it falls back to the codes. As long as they meet all the minimum requirements within the codes, I have no reason that I can say no to them. I can, at my discretion, bring anything back to the Plan Commission for their follow-up approval if needed. But
And the one thing too, John mentioned it, R2 is only twin homes,
But there are conditional uses that's up to 3 or
which,
4-plex.
which would require them to come back before us. I don't believe, is there a conditional use for a fourplex in R2? Yeah.
R2
That
is,
has to come
That's-
back
that's our
before us.
concern.
Yep, that has to come back before us one more time. And we can't say what would happen if something came like that before us, but if they came back in with fourplexes, sixplexes, things like that, we'd look and go, does it conform with the neighborhood? And that's our out. That's where we can basically say, whenever we turn something down, we can put the city at a liability. If we do something just because we felt like it and it wasn't consistent with what we've done in the past, we put the city at a liability of being put into a legal issue.
Our
The
concern-
biggest thing we use is, does it conform with the neighborhood? When we say no, it's normally because it does not conform with the integrity of the neighborhood.
You know, I think most of the neighbors up there agree that the twin homes that they're building nowadays are nice, and they're mostly owner-occupied, rather than rental properties or large rental properties. And I guess, I'm not against somebody renting their house or their duplex or something like that, but what I am concerned about is that it'll just drop in on us. You know,
I'd
we
agree
just
with you,
won't be aware.
because when we look and we say, does this make sense for R2? Yeah, it made every bit as much sense as the R2 that was originally put in on Cherry Drive over there. That's a density issue, where we said that type of ground, that twin home duplex style density works there. A fourplex wouldn't work there, otherwise we would have put it as R3, and it probably bodes well for this property. When we make the conscious decision that should be R2, I don't remember a conditional use in the 12 or 13 years I've been doing this that we've ever allowed a higher density than R2 in the R2, have we? Do you remember any, Kenny? But not in the R2.
that was a conditional use.
Did we? How many years ago did we do that?
5 or 6.
Was it? Yeah, but in a case like that, a conditional use has to come back before us, so.
Okay.
It looks so nice.
That's the best hope.
And, they did note that that could only be divided into six conforming sublots, right?
Well, 6
So-
lots are huge in 3.2 acres. That's twice the size of a normal residential lot.
Right.
The way I came up with 6 lots is I looked at this particular piece of property, and I looked at the parameters of our R2 district, and I found that the limiting parameter would be the lot width. R2 requires 85 feet of lot width, and this property is approximately 600 feet long, so that could be divided into 6 legal-sized lots. So that's how we came up with 6.
You're basically looking at 6 dwellings.
6 dwellings of
But you're
2,
talking 6 dwellings along 14th Avenue, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
that entire piece.
This.
Those would be deep lots, you know,
Yep.
100 feet, that's 230 feet long, if a lot's 100 feet wide. We're looking at over 23,000 square feet per lot.
Yes.
6 lots.
Yes, they will be deep and they will have a large square footage because of that, but they have to have 85 feet of width. So, because of that, they can only be divided into 6 without coming before you with a preliminary plan to put in some sort of cul-de-sac or something, which would require a lot more planning.
So
and
that,
public
so
hearings
that area would probably hold 12 families.
if they were all
Maximum
duplexes.
12 families.
Yeah.
And when it comes into the time of plating, that's when we'll see how the architects design that piece of ground for them. Like you said, you could put a cul-de-sac in there and maybe, but you still have, each lot has to have a minimum square footage.
Yeah, I understand that. We're, I guess, the neighborhood's just looking for some resolution here that they can just finally relax and not have to stay so vigilant as to what's going on.
Should have said that, trust us.
Jim, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did the neighborhood get notified that this was being?
Some did. I was the last house on 22nd Street.
We are
Nobody's
going to
waiting.
change that. The way our ordinance reads right now is adjacent landowners. I have been contacted by some council members that said, guys, we need to, just something that was overlooked. It wasn't anything anyone tried to slip by, but we are going to change our ordinance that if the adjacent property is city-owned or municipality or school-owned, it's going to leapfrog that onto
Yeah,
the
I would hope
neighborhood.
so.
Pat,
That's something we're going to
And
work
at
on.
this meeting, I extended the notices a lot farther because of that last time.
our goal was to include every property that looked directly onto this area. That was we modified our boundary to that. We figured that would at least include all of the lots that have a line of sight into that property.
This area, we've learned a lot from this area up here. I know we talked today, in the future, the way drainage works up there, we're gonna try to change some things the way the city does it to buys drainage ways. I know from the Park and Rec Board, they've looked and said, we'd like to identify areas where we want park and recs, or the parks in all adjacent quarter sections. We'd like to go as far as maybe the city actually purchases that ground long before these developments happen, so we don't have the drainage problems we've had and things like that, park things.
We appreciate that they let those that look directly on it, but, if it goes to R3, I think you might even want to go farther because it affects the entire area, property value-wise, I'm sure. So whether you're looking directly on it or just the next house down, I think it still affects you as your property values.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration. It might be that we have different distances we go based on what the zoning is. Is it R1, R2, C1, C2, C3? We might want to advise further out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the zoning? Going once, twice?
Just in time. My name is Mike Odland. I live 1279 Cherry Drive, which would be this lot right there. I think we're trending in the right direction here. As I talked to the neighbors, they were all very uncomfortable with R3. I think we're more comfortable with R2, but as I sit here today, I'm a little bit leery about the Planning Commission giving a positive thumbs-up recommendation on R2 without knowing exactly how the land has been platted. And maybe you have a checks and balances system where once you get this platted, you can tweak it a little bit, but I assume if you give an R2 thumbs-up recommendation, you can't go back on that. Is that correct?
I'll refer to my legal counsel. Generally what happens, we will zone that R2. They'll come to us with a plat in front of us again. They have 3 years to record that plat. If that plat isn't recorded in 3 years, it dissolves. But Stan, the zoning doesn't dissolve. The zoning stands, but the plat dissolves if it's not recorded in 3 years, correct?
Well, under the code, as the commissioners know, the individual landowner, the plan commission, or the city council can initiate a rezone. So to Mike's question, if the R2 recommendation is approved by the city council, there's nothing to say that down the road, that zoning designation couldn't be changed.
Okay. Just a couple of other concerns I have is if in fact there are 6 R2 buildings put on this 3.2 acres and you look at all of the already existing R3, and once this is all built up in R2, that's a lot of buildings R2 and above in a small area, and how much is too much? The other concern is traffic right now on 14th Avenue, which is a collector street. When you get down in this area in here, it's only a half road, pretty narrow, with no curb and gutter on the north side of the property. And if you are going to, you really can't do any on-street parking through here, because if you put a vehicle on the side of the road, you're not going to have enough width to get 2 vehicles through at the same time. So I think that's a concern as well. And the other concern that I would have, and I can't speak for the rest of the neighborhood, but just myself here, is typically, is there any kind of buffer between R1 and R2? Would there be anything in here at all? And again, I'm not opposed to development. I just want it to be, proper and thoughtful.
The question of, is there anything that can buffer R1 and R2? Not a zoning buffer, we couldn't, but we could put we would refer to it as more screening than anything else. Is it a berm? Is it trees? Is it fencing? We'll see more of that when it comes time to the platting and the building permits. When the building permits come out or the platting comes out, we may look at the layout and say, based on the way this is, where we see it more times than not when we request screening is when you got residential and commercial together. We make the commercial person screen so the headlights don't shine into someone's house, or when streets don't line up, we'll make the developer screen so when the lights come down the streets, they don't go in there. Or if we have commercial close to R2, for instance, say a convenience store wanted to go in there by conditional use, we would make that convenience store possibly screen those neighborhoods, and that's something that we can take a look at when the plat comes in as to how it's laid out. The question you had on the road, we agree with you on the half street. This board agrees with you. I could say we deal with that all the time. Where the problem comes in is the property owners on your side of the street put in the street. The property owners on the other side of the street put the other half of the street in, which is in the county.
Right.
I would say that if we rezone this, the next step it goes from us to city council, that we rezone it with the council asking the council to consider finishing the street. What may happen, and we see that in time, the council doesn't always like to do that, but what would happen is the city of Watertown and the rest of the taxpayers in our community pay for the other half of that street. And then when the land across the road comes into the city, it can be recovered at that time when that's zoned in, when it's annexed in, I'm sorry.
The other question I have, and maybe this would be best for Stanton, if an R2 recommendation is made today, can it be done with the caveat that it would be given an approval contingent upon a plat that is agreeable to the Planning Commission? Because to me, zoning it without seeing exactly what their plans are seems to be putting the cart before the horse here.
That's how all zoning is done
So-
everywhere.
so-
Normally, a person will bring land into the city, they'll annex it in with a zone. Could be years before we see any plat. We've got, boy, Ken, how many areas do we have that, you know, what happens up in your addition right here? You can see some of the land that's blanked out. That was zoned but never platted. All the homes on the edges of your addition in Eastwoods and up there, that's all been zoned years and years ago, and they'll plat it and annex half a block by half a block most of the time.
Another example, Mike, is along Willow Creek Drive. Back in 2007, nearly all that property was annexed into the city and given zoning designations. And to my knowledge, very, very few of that area has been lots in that, or potential lots in that area have been platted. It's just got a zoning designation.
A lot of times people don't want to plat it because they're not sure what they want to do with it. And then in the cost and the expense to replat it is there. So a lot of times they'll annex it in. We feel safe from a planning commission that when we zone it, that it fits the character of the area. We get one more look at it when it comes to the platting, and then we have one more look at it at the building official's desk, that if he sees anything that looks suspicious, setbacks, height of the building versus the setback. Sometimes if the building's too tall, they'll bring it to us and say, we don't want the variance to be approved, or we get to look at it.
Am I correct in assuming that once it is platted and that comes before the planning commission, that there would be another public hearing and a chance
Yes.
for the neighbors to?
When they come
to
with the
speak
plat
up
is a
when-
public hearing.
Okay.
That plat, when the platting process happens, that's a public hearing, just like it is today. And then it's platted, and basically the lots are drawn out. The building permit still hasn't been pulled on any of it. He may come in and say, this is the diagram of how I want it platted. It might be 10 years before he actually pulls a building permit. He might sell it 2 or 3 times before the building permit comes in. But that's why we have setbacks and things like that to try to keep people away from each other if we can.
That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mhm.
Hi, Luke.
Hi, Chairman. Luke Muller, First District. I just wanted to point out one thing that was mentioned. I just wanted to underscore it and make sure that I'm on the same page too. The zoning designation of R2 allows for a permitted use up to a duplex. And then 3 and 4 family dwellings are conditional uses. That's correct. And there's nothing above 4 family dwellings in the R2 district. So anything that's a 3 or 4 family dwelling would require a conditional use. You did say that, but that's the second part to the question that was asked there, is that if there's anything above a duplex, it would require a public hearing again as well, even after the plat. Just want to make that point.
Thanks, Luke. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the zoning request? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second. And I would like in the motion, if you so choose, that we put it with the recommendation of the city council to consider putting in the rest of the half street. And part of that too comes with right-of-way. We don't put a street in unless we have a right-of-way. And that's a negotiation with that landowner.
And that has come up at times where people have said they want that road right now, and they say the city may do that, but as soon as it's sold, the property owners would be responsible to pay for that road then. So it has been done, and that's a good area there for that to be considered, I think.
Thank you. I want to put one other note. Stanton made mention that is a safeguard to the neighborhood up there. We'll say, I'd like that plat to make sure it comes before the Plan Commission, that it's not administratively approved. Not that it would be, I think they'd like it to come, but to give these people a satisfaction that sometimes a plat with less than 5 lots or less can be administratively approved. If this came in at 5 lots, somebody could just not think anything of it and go, hey, it works, we can administratively approve it. I say in our motion, we include in that motion that the plat can't be administratively approved. That way we're guaranteed a public hearing. Now I'll ask for a motion in a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Arnold. Second by Mr. Stonebarger. Discussion. In that motion included, Jeff, was a recommendation that the city council considers the other side of the half street, and that the plat cannot be administratively approved, so it has a public hearing for the neighborhood.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is the Stewart Edition plat.
Just a second, let me pull up a document for that.
You're welcome to leave if you'd like to. You don't have to stay. We're in for another good hour. I'm sure Mike will highlight it on the radio for us, right, Mike?
All right, Pat, I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. All right, we received a petition to replat, 3 lots, within the Bragi addition or within, Derby Downs area. And it's these 3 lots that I'm moving my cursor over. And the reasoning behind the request to replat them is, as you can see from this drawing, these 2 lots are small, and they're smaller than our required lot size and smaller than our required zoning would allow for those lots. So they would like to replat these 3 lots, 2 of which are below our standard lot size, and replat it into this, where it's 2 larger lots that conform to our
can't
zoning.
approve it. They can't
This area is
administratively
zoned
approve a replat.
R1 and is adjacent to R1 on all sides except for the south, where it's still county zoning.
We can approve a plat, a new plat.
One thing with this plat is the old plat had a access easement running right down the middle of it, and this new revised plat has moved that access easement to the east property line, so the access easement would come up this line and then down and then up again. And that access easement is the same size as it was before. It just now has curves in it. And
The access easement is for utilities, basically.
the access easement is to give these interior lots access, since they were allowed to be platted without fronting public right-of-way. And so that's why there's an access easement that was put in there. Do you have any other questions for me?
On those other lots, are there are they individually owned, or are they owned by the property owners to the west?
I'll turn on the parcels layer.
The question
off the
is
plats layer.
Is that access easement currently being used at all?
People have the right to use it. Currently, these orange lines are the property lines, and so those lots aren't owned individually, but they're owned in conjunction with other lots. But people can still use that access to get them if they would so choose. But these are the property lines.
Can you put the new lines up there also?
Well, the new plat is just a plat for this area right here. this
Okay,
big
so
lot.
the access easement will come up
Yep.
along the side of
Yeah,
that
yeah, currently
structure.
this access easement goes right down where my cursor's going, and they're gonna bump it out and then come down here. So it'll go up, over, and up.
Thank you. And Jeff, a new plat with 5 or less lots can be done administratively, but a replat cannot?
Well, with this one, because of the relocation of the access easement, we just thought,
Come to
because it
us.
was controversial a little bit that way, that we would
Okay.
bring it before you guys in council.
All right, thank you, Jeff, for that. I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the replat. Charlie, state your name for the record.
Sure will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Charlie Larkin, and I apologize for the dark glasses, but I couldn't see you without them because my other glasses happen to be sitting in my desk. The problem we have with it is easement is access to lot, address 321, go straight up, right there. Whoops, you went too far, right there. Is he extended his backyard because he was told he had utility easement. It's on, granted by the, his title insurance when he bought that back lot. And he would be here himself, but 2 weeks is not enough time. He's in Nevada right now working on a job. If he could have more time, he would come here and you could quiz him himself. It's Robert Markle Sr. But he had less than 2 weeks, actually. It was 13 days from notification till, and we just don't think that was enough time for him to be able to get back and make arrangements to fly back here for that. But he needs access to that back. He actually had to turn his fence doors open because they moved the utility box on him without his knowledge, so he had to change his fencing in order to get access to his backyard. And there's others along there that use that utility access also as ingress and egress.
So explain to me how changing it from going straight north to going a little farther east and going north and coming west, how is that going to affect,
He wouldn't have access to his backyard.
what's going to run?
Okay, see, if you look at,
Here's the plat, and it still shows an access easement coming up what would be the east side of the new lot, and then coming across the north side of it, and then it ties into the existing existing easement that's already there. So the easement will still exist, it'll just be moved to the east side of that property.
but come around to the corner, go straight up now from there.
This is all this page has, but I can,
Well, no, I mean, here's, if you go, move the cursor just a little bit to the west, right there, whoa, go straight up right now. That's where his gates are now. He's moved them twice.
And the fences shouldn't be there, and it should be moved a third time. Because his fence is over the access easement. He's covered up 50% of it.
He owns that part.
But the access easement still exists.
Yeah, he would let
He's
him
blocked
through
it.
They can go through it if they want to.
They can, but what about the neighbors that
The
want to go
neighbor
up and
can
down?
too. Anyway, I guess my main point is he needs ingress and egress to his backyard, and they would appreciate having more time, having this put off until he can get back here to appear.
Okay, now the easement runs straight north
currently.
and it would coincide with the back part of his lot.
Can you put your pointer
So,
right where it
by
turns
having it-
north?
Yes,
Right where you think it turns north?
it'll turn right at the corner of this, be 10 feet south of this line, so it'd turn about right here.
Further over to his fence. So what Charlie's saying is he'd have to move his gates onto the north-south, I guess, if that's
But his gates don't
north-south.
line up with the current easement right now, technically.
Does that access easement go right on past his property, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
Continues
goes,
on?
it goes,
How do they get around his buildings there? Is that building in the over the access easement?
the building is
fence too?
on 10 feet, both sides of the line, of the property line. Find my, so it goes out to about the edge of the building is about 10 feet using my measurement tool. It's about right in here. It's the access easement. And then it goes 10 feet this way.
So
too.
okay, so his fence is right down the center of the current easement.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
But
that's
there's
what
also
Ken's-
green medical, electrical boxes, and there's trees, and there's all kinds of things.
That are
in the
inside the
center.
fence.
Oh, no, down the middle of that easement already.
Yeah, they were moved there though after the fact, Ken. The utility easement, the utility boxes on the south end of that fence were moved. They weren't there. When they moved them is when he had to change his gate to get in and out. That was after he built the house in the late 90s. Because utility companies have the right to do that.
So the dilemma is the landowner wants to change the lot, so he has two buildable lots. Probably so he can either build a house or sell on either lot, but what that's gonna do is it's gonna change that easement.
It's
gonna-
vacating that whole, it's vacating that whole
It's
utility
it's
easement.
moving it, his access to it's gonna come from a different direction. He'll still go, he's not gonna come directly into it, he's gonna have to go up and slide around. And it would require him to possibly move a gate if he was bringing in an RV or something like that. And it looks like to me that's an RV right there.
Is there how wide is the
New easement?
new easement?
It's the same width. The current easement is 20 feet, and the new easement is also 20 feet.
Okay, I mean, there's lots of issues with this whole easement. There's several encroachments from end to end, one being a fence, others being sheds. There's trees in there. There's no realistic route that supports ingress egress. So ultimately, the primary purpose of the easement is to provide for the utilities that serve all those properties that abut the easement area. I mean, if we were to do this correctly, that whole area would be cleared out and there would be an outlet at each end of the easement. There is no outlet on the north end. There's no practical way for people to go in and turn around, come back out of that without driving on private property.
And when you say easement, what type of easement? Is it a utility easement?
It's
That's an
utility and
access. So it's a,
It says
nowadays
access,
in a normal division, we don't have an access easement. We have utility easements that only utilities, firefighters can get in and out.
Ideally, this would be replatted from end of that block to end of the block, eliminate the access portion of the easement and call it a utility easement, and everybody would be able to put up the fence right to their edge of their easement like they,
Because it's not an
would like.
alley, it's an access
not an
easement
alley.
that's used as
that's correct.
ingress and egress. Thank you. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against Mark? Yeah. One quick one, Mark's from the utilities.
Mark Meyer, Watertown Utilities. The only issue that I have is on the east side, that being called a utility access, because we're gonna have 4-foot electric boxes in there, cable TV, phone. There's no way it'll be access, because there's gonna be utilities in there. I mean, there's no way nobody's gonna be able to drive through it. So.
But by replatting this, how does this change what you're doing?
No, I'm saying by moving that access easement to the east along that lot line, we would put utility boxes in that 10-foot, and to have it called an access easement also, to me, doesn't make much sense, because
What would
how is
trigger,
somebody gonna access
what
it?
would trigger you to put boxes in there, adding a home or two?
And actually, we already have a box in there, because we've made an arrangement.
And the width of the
For
easement,
an
you
easement
said was
already.
20?
20 feet, yep. It's
How big are the boxes?
4-foot.
So there's still
Transformer's
so there's
4
still
by 4.
16 feet of easement.
But it's only called out as a 10-foot.
no, it's
Oh,
the
they've changed
yep.
it, huh?
So it's 20 feet.
So we actually have 20 feet of workable space from the access
The
portion
plat
of
I
it.
had showed 10.
But in your case, there will be boxes in there that they'll have to negotiate or in or around.
Yeah, in fact, there already is. We put them in there last week.
All right, thank you.
Carol Stonick-Markle. I have the house at 312. As you can see, in the north or southeast corner, there is a utility there. We have the fence cut out so they have access to it at all times. I have dogs that have open rein in my backyard. In 2011, we went through this before. The city gave us permission to put the fence up to the fence on the utility, our property line. We negotiated with the previous owner. He didn't want us having the gates on the east side, so we put it on the south side so we would comply. There is access through there. The owners all the way up and down go in through that. There is a roadway on the south side where we access it. There is not one, should he move the utility over, there would have to be one built there for us to get in and out. Now, from my perspective, I put RVs back there. One of our RVs 28, the other one is 34, 36. For me to do it across that little angle and going in, it'd be very, very challenging for me to back in an RV into that location that way. So we went out of our way, we took out the gate, we put it on the south side like he wanted, and now when I can come in, I can back it in and back it in between the trees. I have an issue with cutting down the trees. It makes the area look nicer. It does fantastic things for wind and shade. Right now, there's my 28-foot one back there. Well, actually, I'm heading to Anchorage this weekend, and I'm bringing our RV down from Alaska, and there's going to be a 36-foot one in there within a week's time frame. That straight access through that easement is how I get in there. You do it through the other way, I won't be able to access it. I won't be able to get in through my yard. The way we'd have to go back and forth across the back of those personnel's property, I wouldn't be able to get in. All the people up and down to the north of me use that utility access to get into their properties. We don't have an issue with it. We respect each other's property, and we go in and out all the time. We turn around our own property to get out. We know it's a one-way issue. It hasn't been a problem. We respect each other's property, and we use it. We use it a lot. Yes, there is a roadway in there, although it's not defined in the property or in the plating. It is in there, and you can see it's been used. We would like to keep that access at that point. It's a straight in and out. Come this winter, when you start talking about a couple corners, you're talking about a lot of snow drifts that make it impossible for us to get in and out. This one here, there's a couple of us that go in there, make sure the snow's in there. We can drive in and out straight out without doing damage. We haven't damaged his property. Yes, I understand his wanting to build there, but I also have to say, when we bought the property, it was agreed upon the utility easement would stay there, and we would have access easement to our property in the back. Several of the other owners were under the same premise.
How much, how far south of your property would the easement have to come in if it's coming from the east and then turning right, or turning north, I guess, if you will, so that you would have the same angle of access where you could utilize it for your RVs and such?
Okay, have you ever backed up a 28-foot travel trailer? Okay, I mean, that's why I'm asking for it to stay. I mean, I would have to be going into another person's lot at least, well, you figure, what is a normal pickup size? I've got a 3/4 ton, I'm assuming 15 feet, plus you're looking 30 feet for the travel trailer. So I'd be going 50 feet in, and that's sitting right on top of the edge of my property. If I'm using it to pull forward enough to back in, then it would be more.
I think what he's saying is,
If I go.
Mark, you're thinking coming up, what
Oh,
they're
you're
saying, the
saying
new
bring
one,
it-
and then coming over, you know,
Okay.
run your pointer up that line right there.
you're
No, come all the way down to the street. Over Your new line's gonna go right there, right? Stop,
Yes.
stop right below the 27. Can it go up a little further, a little further, a little further? Now square it off.
Yeah, you're saying bring it over now.
Yeah.
Okay, problem still is I'd be having to technically either back up all the way in and do a couple turns and to try to turn that travel trailer.
How do you
into-
turn it around now?
I don't. This is backed in here.
You back it in all the way from the street?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I have some great abilities to back it in with a travel trailer. The RV, we pull it in the same way. But right now, it's the travel trailer.
My only concern is that this is a utility easement. This is not necessarily, well, I guess it
Utility
says
and
access.
Access easement.
That one little word in there makes the difference.
And that's
to
the
you.
way it was sold and plotted.
So it is an access easement?
Yes, it currently is, and the proposal is to remain it as an
Okay.
access easement, just
It would remain an access easement. Is it currently how wide? 10 feet?
20 feet.
20 feet? And when they move it to the east side, it only shows 10 feet on here.
When I sent out the agenda, that was the most up-to-date plan I had. He has revised it to show 20 feet. So it remained the same size, it's just on the east side and with the turns.
But I do understand, if that was set aside and you bought your property and that is an access easement, you know, I have an RV too, and there's no way that you could get an RV back in there, in my opinion, if you had to come around those corners and get back into your fence,
Yeah,
into your backyard. I
that
don't
current
know how you
easement
would do
goes
it.
down this dotted line.
And if it was an access easement stated originally when your property was platted and bought, I don't know how you can change that. Is that part of, is that also part of, is it part of what would I say, a platted area, a master planned area? Was it in that plan originally when that larger piece of property was set aside like that? Was that
No, and
access
this larger
easement?
piece is actually,
Not that larger piece, but where those houses are. I assume at one time that was all together, is that correct?
there were lots, and then there was this remainder piece, these remainder pieces that were platted, and then most of them were sold to that adjacent property owners. They were platted after the fact because there was extra property to be sold.
The previous owner, we bought our section from him. He did offer to sell it to the adjoining two people at an extremely exorbitant price about the same cost of what you pay for footage across by Walmart on Highway 212. We offered to buy it from him also. He offered to sell us those two small sections for over $10,000 apiece, which we offered to buy them to keep that utility easement in there and to allow all the people access to it. But they're not worth $10,000. When we bought it, I believe we paid $2,000 or $3,000 for our section.
So what would prevent putting the utility easement on the west side of the property and running it up that way?
Go ahead.
I think utilities are already using the east side, so that's why they were putting the utility and access easement on that side, because that's what currently exists today is a utility and access easement that ran through here. So they were relocating it to the side. I guess you're wondering if you could move the 20-foot access easement to this side. It would cut more into the setbacks. The applicant tried to space the easement over property lines where he could, so that way, when there's the 9-foot setback, that's the normal building area. Here, they'd have to go out an additional foot to build, but if it was 20 feet down this side, they'd have to go to the east 20 feet before they could build, so that just takes away more of the buildable area of the lot. So that's why they went with this route.
So are the fences on the west side that they couldn't use the 9 foot on either side?
Those, this side of this line wasn't originally dedicated as a access easement, so we can't have them dedicated now as an access easement because that's not how it was platted, whereas this one was already platted as an access and utility easement.
Jeff, the owner of those two lots that is asking for this change in this access easement, is that the same person that owned those lots where those houses are today? Is that the person that actually put the access easement in place?
I don't think so. The original plat was done in '92, so that was done a long time ago that platted those lots. It's possible, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't think so.
Okay, then my next question is to you, Stanton. Once a developer comes in and plats out a piece of property and lays all kinds of things into that for various reasons, can someone later come along and just do away with an easement?
There's a process under state statute for vacating an easement. You got to give notice to the adjacent property owners, because at the end of the day, when the easement is vacated, the owner on one side is going to own to the middle of the easement, the owner on the other side is going to own to the middle of the easement, and potentially that's going to increase their assessed valuation. So there's a process under state statute where, yes, an easement can be vacated, but there's a notice and public hearing procedure that has to be followed.
And in this case, that would probably continue. There'd be several homeowners there, one on the east and at least two on the west, or three that would have to all agree.
If vacation was
If they're gonna
being,
vacate.
correct.
The vacation wasn't being proposed, relocation was being proposed.
Yes,
so-
and I understand that, yeah.
The property changed owner in the last 2 months, I guess, and the new owner is the one who's proposing all the changes. And he doesn't realize how much we use that property, that access easement in the back. All of us do.
Yeah, and I probably said enough, but that's why access easements are put in, is for the adjoining landowners to get to the back of their property, because sometimes there's no way to get back there once lots are all sold off. You can't get to your property. So that's why access easements are put in place initially.
I'll let any of the, I know there's a few others here who want to speak.
Hello. I live at 322, and we have a garage that we've built in the back.
Can I get your name? please?
Jeannie Burnt.
Thank you.
Jeannie Burnt. And on the title, when we bought from the Bragies, we paid $2,000 for the extra 50 feet. And we knew that we would have access to that back garage, so we built the garage. And it says there is a 10-foot utility easement along the northeast-south lot lines as disclosed by the plat filed for record on July 15th, 1992, in the Book of Am plats in the pages 357 to 364. Note, access to Lot 7 of the Bragi addition is gained by the access and utility easement as disclosed by the plat filed for record on the 15th, 1992, in Book M, and the pages again.
And this is Lot 7 of the Bragi addition, and so that's saying that that easement was part of that plat in '92 that goes up through here into Lot 7. This is labeled as Lot 7.
Yeah, and we use it quite a bit. My
So-
husband works on cars. We go in and out of the access to get to our back garage.
Can you draw on there with the pointer as to how you get to your garage?
Yeah, we go right from the street here and go right up.
You go right along their fence.
Yeah,
You're on the outside edge of their
Yep.
fence, and in between that tree there that's in that,
yep.
just kind of swerve around the tree.
And that's basically why we bought that extra 50 feet, is that so we knew we were gonna build a garage eventually.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
But what you just talked about, Jeannie, it says utility access or utility easement, and it talks about access, but it doesn't specifically define it as a, access easement, does it?
Well, yeah,
The plat
No,
has it
what
labeled.
you just read, it didn't.
this was the title,
It talked,
yeah. Well, and us and the neighbor, former neighbor, which is still our neighbor, the wife is, we put a culvert in at our own expense, so we could use that access to get to our garages. So that was our own money that we built the culvert, got it done through the city.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else speak on behalf or against the replat?
Hi, my name's Kathy Selchert, and I'm at 318 28th Street. And so we bought the extra 50 feet in the back, and the only way we can get back there is through that access easement. And we were always told that we always had that straight shot to our backyard. We have no other way to get to our backyard. Our house is wide enough to where there's no access even on either side of our house. And if they would change the access to have those couple turns in there, there's no way you can even get, you can't even turn. And plus, Mark Meyer just said that they're gonna, the utilities is right in the middle of it. So there's no way for me to access my backyard now with those utilities right in the middle of the access now. So we need that straight shot just to get in my backyard.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public hearing before I close it?
I'm Mike Stewart. I bought the property knowing the access easement was there. I think for taking the 20 feet, moving it over, gives them plenty of room to access there. The boxes are not, you still have plenty of room to get around them. The fence deal, she would have to move her gates no matter what, because if you measure 10 feet from the property line to where her gates start, she could not even have her gates no matter what. If I wanted to block it off right now, I could. Then, since the fence is there, what's saying, right now, with the way it is, I still could build in that 50-foot by 160-foot lot. I could build a house there. If they put a fence around, just like they do, and the other property, which would be Lot 2 of the Brady addition, if they put a fence around, they block that whole access easement. Is that legal then, since they have the fence, or not?
Legally, they can't put a, correct, Ken, you can't put a fence on top of an easement.
The existing fence that's there is illegal and should not be there. It should be 10 foot off of that property line.
Yeah, you can't put a fence on easement. There's some areas, I noticed there's one on 14th Avenue where you look and there's a tunnel between fences.
You can put a fence on an easement, but you can't put a fence on an access.
Access easement, yeah. So that being said, she would have to move her fence, or that neighbor would have to move their fence no matter what, as of today, correct? We can make them move it? Okay. So, I don't think you could get an RV from the street or a trailer camper backing in. I'd be blocking 3rd Avenue and backing it in all the way through there and back it in to that fence area. I would like to see that happen, but either way, I can build on it. I'm trying to move it and make that easement just off to the side, giving the same property that I'm giving you back, the same property I'm taking, is what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Stewart while he's up there? Seeing none. Mark, you have another question or a statement?
Mark Meyer again. The only thing I was trying to explain is I just think a utility easement and an access easement should be shown separate, because if it's all a utility easement, technically a utility could put a box anywhere in it and block the access. I'm just saying they should be designated as two different things.
And currently, Jeff, we don't even issue access easements anymore in our plats. I can't remember ever seeing one. This is an
Not very
old plat.
common, no.
I think we now know why. They can get complicated. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the change? Come on up.
First thing is addressing the illegal fence. Carol Stonick Markle. June 28th, 2011, we brought this forward here, discussing the easement and the fence. At that point, the city gave us permission to build our fence out to the fence line. We do have the paperwork. You can look in the records.
I would need to see that.
I have the one letter. I don't have the other final letter showing that it was approved, but I do have it where we were given permission to move it out. I'm assuming, knowing the city, keeps their paperwork for many years, you'll find it too. Second thing is, yes, I understand. I'm not totally objecting the fact that the fence could possibly have to be moved. We had it back before when they asked us to. When we sought permission to move the fence out, you guys gave us fence permission, we moved it out. We moved the gates, so we were not going through his main property. He wanted it just going in through the access. Everyone comes in and out. There is a nice solid road there that I can back my RV in through that area, and I do. We bring other stuff in through that. We've had construction vehicles coming in through that. It supports it. Making it, the jog around those corners makes it difficult. And if you look at our title, my title insurance, when you read it, it says, is gained by the access and utility easement. It doesn't say implied access. It says access and utility easement in the title insurance. So it's not an implied access easement. It's stated that way. One other thing. What was that? So those are the things. We've offered, I'd still stand, and we'd look at the homeowners taking and buying those two adjoining lots just to keep that easement there for our use. We were open to it, not at an exorbitant price that they were asking, at a reasonable price. We'd take it just to keep that lot available for us to use in this current fashion, but not at an outrageous price. We use the property, all of us use it. We're willing to keep it that way. The properties were bought, the 50-foot properties were bought with the implied and written consent in our documents that our access was going to be built through that air straight in there. I know you guys think, okay, I can come along and pull that trailer in my backyard coming in from that opposite direction. It's not feasible. It really isn't. I'm going to let any one of you try and do it with my pickup and my thing, and if you guys can succeed in doing it, I'm open-minded. But I drive it and park it a lot, and I have trees in my backyard, and if you go back there and look, there's probably about 3 foot on either side of my RV where I slip it right in and straight back in there. Going the other direction, I don't have a big problem moving the fence or cutting the trees down, but I really do like the trees back there. It's pretty. We have animals. It does many things. So to me, it's a little bit of the beauty of the area also. And so, yes, we're asking you guys to consider the hearing before he rezones it and rezones the utility easement. Please consider. I mean, we've spent a lot of years out there. I understand it's his property. He would like to make some changes on it. But respect the fact that we've lived there for quite some time. We built and bought the additional property with the consent that we were going to have access easement all the way back. And there's just, like I said, we all respect the rights of everyone else. We respect it when we drive down the middle of that property line. No one's complained about my fence being on there because they still get in through the 10-foot and being within reason. If I have to move the fence, I'll do it again.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing unless somebody has something to say quick.
Mike Stewart, could you take the pointer and measure out from the fence over to 10 feet?
Yeah.
Or property line 10 feet over?
About right in there. is
Okay,
about as close
so
as I can
she's
measure it.
saying she can't move around a couple of corners and boxes, which is fine, but she can somehow not get on my property, which I have now, and back that camper straight in the way she's got it, is what she's saying. And if the fence gets moved back, and then how is she gonna get the campers in there without coming from the south anyway, straight in? She'll have to totally change it. Unless I'm not seeing things the way it realistically would be. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Dolly. Oh, I'm sorry. Motion by Mr. Stein. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of the replat, say aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion fails. Next item on the agenda is the Stony Point 3rd edition of preliminary plan.
Okay. Take me just a second, I'll get us there.
Yes, we're moving on to number 5, which is Stony Point 3rd edition. I'd like to make a note for the record that
I would just like to state that I'll be excusing myself from the board from any discussion or any vote on this issue, that I have a potential conflict of interest being an adjacent landowner.
thank you.
All right, I'll give a brief overview of this area. It's the area that we've all seen before, as it's been in the works since October of 2014, when the petitioner came in with their first concept plan, which was different than this, but at that time, they had a concept plan that went through our process and through our preliminary plan process, and was approved in March of 2015 with some conditions. And then instead of platting that particular layout, they've come forward with a new set of plans that have this lot layout, and they're looking for approval of the preliminary plans. The adjacent zoning to this is there's C2 that's already existing, and this line should go down to include this lot, because it does. Then this property zoned R1. There's some R3 to the west side and some agricultural to the south. This total area is about 21 acres, and the applicant's proposing to do 4 different zoning designations. They want R1, R2, R3, and C2 within this configuration. I also want to note that I handed out to the board members a newly revised set of preliminary plans that were similar to the ones that are in your packet. We asked the developer to just add a few notes and update some of the pages, so they're, for the most part, very similar. The road width's the same size and same location, just has a few more notes. Also, I handed out a modified resolution to the board members that added 3 conditions, and as we go through the resolution, I'll point those ones out and point out why we added those. But if you'd like to start the discussion or start asking questions, I'll let you do that, Chairman.
Thank you, Jeff. What we'll do is I'll open the public hearing, close the public hearing, then we'll discuss the conditions within the resolution and any changes to those that may occur during the public hearing, and then we'll move on from there. So with that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the preliminary plan.
Mr. Chairman, Bob Drake, one of the developers for this point, or plan. I guess basically we've changed the whole tone of this thing in that we're going into the property instead of dropping to the south. We were originally going through the wetland to the south in Block 3. And we've changed that so that we're actually going into basically where the Stella May used to house, which is clear towards the top portion of the channel, except for we're outlet into the Hidden Valley area. So, I don't know how you... So this Hidden Valley is down in here, and this is where the Stella May used to be housed years ago, and that's where there was a channel originally here. And what we've done is we've continued that channel on down into the property, gone back into where the Williams had a fish hatchery deal, and then on to the east, instead of going into the wetland area, which would be down in here. So we're just exiting into this channel. In this area right in here, the lake has basically filled this back in, so it's actually in a pretty high level. So that's why we've exited out into this area, and then the actual exit would go on in here. The drainage wise, there were some questions on the drainage before. With this channel going this far, we will actually have the drainage coming through here and then on out. So that'll minimize any drainage that would go to the east, that would go into the channel, as well as this. There would be some minimal stuff that goes there now that would drain basically here to the south. But for the most part, everything would be draining that way or down. I guess with that, are there any questions?
From the top, the biggest question the areas that I had questions in are street width, lack of sidewalks, the substitution of sidewalk walking trail versus sidewalk, the lack of curb and gutter, and using a ditch or a swale. And then the question I had was on drainage again. What have we done to minimize the drainage onto adjacent property owners? So
Well, the drainage now would, as this is shaped, would feed towards this middle channel.
how about to the south? Anything? So
To the
so we
south.
pretty much mitigated it over on the on the north side. How about as you approach that area,
Right
that
down
area right
here?
there? Yeah.
Okay, this does drain towards the south now. There is a retention area that would be put in here to take care of any water on that end.
And that's a water quality facility that's shown in your plans that were submitted in the packet, as well as the new ones.
There's also another one in here and over in here, I believe.
Yep, right there.
Yep.
And those are water quality facilities designed to help filter out particles from a storm event before entering the lake or other receiving body of water.
I see we got a 66-foot right-of-way, which that's what the city requires. We normally require a 37-foot road. The density of this plan is significantly more dense than what we were going to do before.
Actually, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, it's actually less because we've taken out a row of lots and gone to the east instead so that we can maintain the larger sized lots. If you look right in here, originally there was a row and there was two sets of lots.
They were on both
We were
sides
getting,
of that.
yeah, we were getting.
We didn't have the 14,000 square foot lots down below.
We didn't have
Stony
these.
Point.
Yeah, we didn't.
Those
have
are
these.
those aren't considered. I mean, there's not the commercial lots are large. There's a few what I would
These are-
consider
these are
very
all pretty good size. I mean, total lots. These would be the smaller lots. Yeah. And then this was already zoned commercial, and we just
Correct.
left it.
Correct.
Like right up in
just like what's above it.
Yeah.
Why 26, not 37?
White 26, again, trying to
That-
keep with the rural setting, the rural road. We've discussed this, I guess, last time many times, but
Doesn't seem as rural as I envisioned it.
you got to remember this is over 21 acres, so there's quite a bit of space here.
Okay, so for your R3 zoning, you've got lot 7 and lot 8? Is that correct?
Yeah, right there, yeah.
And then what are lots 5 and 9 and whatever the?
To the, I guess is that to
Yeah.
the south of the
Those,
to the
what are
south of
those?
those. Those are R2 around
Those- yep.
Hunk Potty Circle.
Yep. Yeah, these two, the first two you mentioned, are planned to be zoned R3. These three were planned to be zoned R2. And then this one lot is C2, and then the rest of the lots were R1.
R1, okay. And when you dredge out that, how much are you gonna have to dredge out? What's the height difference between what's there now and what you're gonna have to take out to get that channel?
Well, if we take it down, if we went down to the, I could ask Rod this, but I think Originally, we'd looked at going down to 5 feet, and that would have been 30,000 ton, I think, and then, or 20,000 ton. And then our yards, and then we looked at actually pulling it down a little bit deeper. Right now, he did some measurements over in Hidden Valley, and there's a little over 2 feet. So we wanted to get it deep enough that we wouldn't have it filling back in right away, so.
So is it gonna be just a 5-foot height difference between the land and the channel itself? And how are you going to?
From the water level, the current water level. Yeah.
How are you gonna prevent erosion on that?
We would put concrete on both sides of the channel as well.
And the sloping down from the level land?
Yeah, sloping down, but yet, contouring for your retention, and then having your cement at your high water mark or a little better.
So it'd be, the channel's gonna be cement all the way through. That R3, that's one of the questions I had, that finger that goes out, can you bring up the zoning map? Yeah, you can put it there. That finger that goes out off that R3 piece there, is that,
Oh, yeah.
what's that made up of?
That right now is basically a mound. It looks like when they built the Stella May channel, that was where they had piled the dirt, is what it looks like. And so it actually goes all the way out to that point.
Is that gonna be essentially a cement walkway then, or what?
That will be, it'll be maintained to just keep that separation between that wetland.
Cement
and
or,
that channel.
cement, or will it stay as a dirt mound all the way to the,
We'll probably cement that all out.
all the way out to the edge? How wide's the channel? I can,
It's 40 feet, I believe, on the one end and 30 on the other end.
Who's gonna maintain that wall once those lots are sold? Is that gonna go
That'll-
responsibility with the homeowner?
Yeah, it'll go to the homeowner association. Yep.
The permit for the channel, the 440 permit, is that what it's called?
404, yeah, was it 4?
That you would apply for when?
It's being applied for right now. There's, they requested a little bit more information, but we're getting closer, I think. It would have to.
and that is
It
to,
would be contingent upon that being approved.
and that is to break into through the wetland, or is that to dig the channel, or both?
That's for to come through the wetland. Actually, once you reach the high water mark, the channel part of it you can do. That would be just up on the top portion. Yep.
So the channeling doesn't require the permit from the,
It just requires, for this much here, we
Right
have to.
in there.
Yeah, there's a wetland in this area. Yep.
the mitigation of that? Do you have to mitigate that or not?
Oh, they'll let us know.
Okay.
Yep. Probably. That's the way it sounds. So we probably have to come down below and then add some more.
Jeff, can
down
you
below.
overlay the high water map on top of those lots?
I can turn on our contours on GIS, and our GIS map isn't perfect, but it can give us an idea. Ordinary high water mark is at an elevation of 1719.3, so I'll be able to find the 1720 line will be bold, so it'll give us a good estimate of where it is. Just
Can you turn on the flood elevation, the 1725?
yeah.
So the first line's going to be the high water mark. The next line's going to be the base flood elevation for flood.
Turn this to a layer that we can see more clearly. Wow, it's a lot of contours. Let me zoom in. So it's a lot of contours to make it a little bit hard to see, but this is the 1720 contour that comes around, and it comes around this floodplain or wetland. That's why this lot is where it is. And as you said, it wasn't going to be developed, but then this is the floodplain itself. And floodplain, the pink, goes to an elevation of 1724.8. So that's where the pink line's drawn.
So those lots to the south, 1, 2, 3, 4, they'll need to be filled to be built on?
Luke's gonna help me out with setting GIS parameters.
Could always count on Luke.
That's right.
So the pink is below the flood level.
The buildings will have to be elevated, yeah.
Right, the buildings will have to be up above that flood level. Kind of gives you an idea of the buildable lot space on those lots without. And I think a person can fill a lot as much as they want as long as it's not a wetland. You know, that's common.
Yeah. The line that, hopefully it's still there. Yeah, this line that Luke highlighted for us is the 1720 contour, and 1719.3 is the ordinary high water mark. So that gives us a good approximation where it's at.
Where does the proposed channel come out through there?
Right through here. It's kind of hard to see with how much I have turned on right now, but it's coming out right here and going in and down.
So to the north there, lots 9 and 10 get severely reduced if there's high water, right?
Yes, the property lines would be at the high water mark, which would be where that, approximately where that is. All those lots do meet the required area for R1 zoning designation. This lot number 9 we looked at, and it's narrow, and it's narrow throughout, so it doesn't meet the average width requirement. But that's, I mean, when it comes to platting, we could require them to make sure that their plat, all the lots meet the required size as set by
It
ordinance.
has the required square footage, but it doesn't have the mean width, the 75 feet.
Correct.
That was one area I looked at, Bob, with that when the first thing that popped out at me was the width of the lots at the street, where I saw 40s and 60s. I thought the next thing I know, we're going to need variances for garages and houses, and
Yeah, the
that
reason
frightened me.
The reason for that one lot being, there's one quite a bit wider to the one end. We had an individual that actually requested, wanted to buy the 2 lots, and that's why we tentatively did it that way. They would be kind of bought together, but otherwise they were both 97 foot wide. Lot 3 and 4, if I can read that right, or what is that, 8 and 9, I guess. Sorry.
I guess my question is,
See, this is the narrow lot he was talking. They had requested this and then a bigger lot here, so.
I have a question after we put the road in, and after you have your high water mark, and then you situate your house and your garage, are they gonna have enough room to build there without getting an easement or parking on the right of way or things like that?
Oh, yeah, these lots are pretty good size. I guess I don't have it sitting in front of me, but go ahead.
I was just gonna pull open the plans, which show lot size. Oops. You know, most of these lots are 15,000 plus lots. All of them are pretty much 15,000 square foot plus lot size.
What's the lot size of 7 and 8 up there? The width, is that 62, 61? Width at the road?
Where you connect to the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that end of the lot is 60 feet, which is 15 feet, 25, yeah. It's 15 feet short of where our minimum lot width is, although it makes it up on the other end. But my concern is variances for separate structures and houses as they want to get.
The reason for that's kind of the cul-de-sac part of it, you know, for being able to attach, but I apologize, I got a cold this week, so.
And what's your road width? I see you have a 66-foot right-of-way, but what's the actual roads that you guys are
The
proposing?
road was, as we discussed before, was the 26-foot road.
The last time you came with a 26-foot wide road, I voted no on that proposal, and I haven't changed my opinion of that.
I struggle with the 26-foot road myself just because there's a commercial lot up there. There's 3 commercial lots. The density is greater than what I imagined. We have a 66-foot right-of-way. I'd like to see a bigger road.
Yeah,
You know,
I'd agree. I mean, if the concept, the explanation of the 26-foot road is because you want to keep the rural flavor, that sure doesn't give me the impression of being a rural flavor as far as, how much stuff you got going on there.
These, like I said, they are pretty good sized lots. The reason they would be sloped gently. North Point, or North Lake Drive and South Lake Drive are 22-foot lots, and they feed the whole area.
you know, North and South Lake Drive have very few homes on both sides of the road. I went and I took a look at Gulfview Estates. I took a look at Prairie Hills to the south. I took a look at Summerwood. Many of those lots are bigger than these lots. They have many lots that are 30, 40,000 square feet. That's not a crazy big lot. They have curb gutter, sidewalks on both sides in many cases, and they have a 37-foot road. Here I look and go, boy, there's going to be more traffic in and out of here than we think, and there's going to be a lot more traffic if a commercial project is developed on that point out there. I can see, I understand the lack of curb and gutter because that requires storm sewer, which moves water faster. And in this area, we don't want water to move faster. We want it to move slower so it naturally filters through. I'd be far more comfortable with a wider road. And then, again, I look at the size, the width of these lots on the roadside. They're not 200-foot widths. They're not 250-foot widths. They're not 1-acre lots. They're not 2-acre lots. You question, why wouldn't we put sidewalk in front of every house? You know, I see you've got a walking trail in there. So the questions I have is, I'd like to see a wider road, and I'd like to see sidewalks unless I can be talked into why there's a walking trail instead of sidewalks.
Well, if we go with the area around there, if you go to Dennis Arnold's to the south, he's got sidewalks on his, but there's a walking trail to the east side of that property. There's a walking trail up North Lake Drive that goes all the way around in that area. And a lot of people use walking trails with bikes, with people walking. I think it's actually safer having walking trails than it is having a narrower sidewalk and that type of thing, personally. But
Size of the road, would you entertain a 37-foot road with no curb and gutter? It'd give us more width. There's more parking on it. Again, we've got roads with no sidewalks, so people will walk on the side of those roads, and the traffic will be. There's going to be a lot of traffic. There's 20, 26, 27 lots, including a couple commercial lots up in there. There's going to be, and there's no. You come out the same way you go in. So on a Sunday afternoon, when someone drives through Prairie Hills and sees Stony Point Drive, they're going to make a hard right, whether they live up there or not. They're going to go up in that area, and they're going to hit the north cul-de-sac and turn back and come around. We, from a Board of Adjustment standpoint, every month we get somebody that says, I can't put 2 cars in a 28-foot garage. I need 32, I need 36 feet. But now we got a 26-foot road, and we're going to have cars meeting on a 26-foot road with other activity going on up at there. It doesn't take long. Some of these lots aren't really that deep at the road when you consider where the homes are going to be built. I think there'll be cars parked on that road out there, you know, when people have gatherings and things like that. That's my concern.
It would seem like to me, just looking at that curb and gutter, and I understand the water issue, but when we put in a development like this, it seems like curb, gutter, and sidewalks should be a part of a new development, and I don't know, a walking road doesn't seem the same to me as a sidewalk and curb and gutter, and it seems like that water should be accounted for then as to how it could be. And then I've been on this for a while, that we are going to have people come in and ask for variances right away on those small lot frontages We see them all the time, and we say that we allow it because they're 100-year-old lots and they're 50 feet wide. This is a brand-new addition, and if we start that, I mean, I would hope that if this gets approved, and I don't get to vote on it, but I would hope that there would be something that said, I don't know if it's even legal, you can say, no variance is allowed. If people are gonna buy that little tiny entrance with no curb and no gutter, no sidewalk, and then come in right away and say, by the way, I want a variance because we can't do the things we want to do on the back end of my lot here. I mean, we hear it all the time. So, personal opinion.
To give you an idea for a reference point, if you take the top lot, if you take lot number, what is it, 6, clear up on top here, that line on the one side's 180 foot long. So as you come down, these lots that get narrower, as you're referring to, have they're much deeper than that. So as you come down, I don't know how you do this. But you see that they get much longer as we're going down.
I don't think the depth is the problem. The problem's going to be when they want everything widened out. That's where we're going to have the problem.
The depth of them goes straight down to the water, too.
If you're going to put, long, narrow homes on there, we're fine, but not too many people want that. They want them spread out this way, and so that's where we're going to run into the variances that Dan's referring to.
Yeah, I can, well, if you go back up the longer drive to those areas, though, they are wide enough for those homes that they're putting in.
Ken, I have one
but
quick
yeah, you do
question
have
for
that
you.
longer.
At the lake, your rear yard setback is the road side. Your front yard setback is the water side. How do we do it in a channel? Where's their front yard? Where's their rear yard? The water. So the channel, it would be just like the lake. So all of these people's rear yards face the road if they're adjacent to the channel. That's the way it's going to be looked at when we come in for setbacks. So most of these houses generally will. It'd be interesting to see how they're going to face their house. Are they going to put the front to the cul-de-sac, or are they going to put the front to the channel? But the setbacks would, you've got a greater front yard setback than rear yard, but it wouldn't matter how they face it, Ken. We're going to say right now, front yard 35, you're 30, what are we, 30 feet to the channel and 25 to the back?
In the R1 zone where you have a 25-foot rear setback and a 25-foot front setback, so it's the same setback on both sides. Or at the lake it's 30, excuse me.
So is this considered at the lake when you have a channel that meanders to the lake?
Well, what we have here is, it says in the ordinance, the only thing it says is in areas directly adjacent to Lake Kempesca and Lake Pelican, the yard adjacent to the lake shore shall be considered as the front yard. And
I
that
would
is
say
a
it's not
30
directly
foot.
adjacent.
That is a 30-foot.
Would you, Stan?
How is Hidden Valley done? I guess I don't know.
I guess I'd have to ask, and it's a rhetorical question because I don't know the answer. Is the channel considered an extension of Lake Kempesca? That's its water source. Is it a natural extension of the existing lake, or is the lake clearly defined?
The channels essentially become waters of the state, so they are public waters. I guess you could interpret them as lake or not, depending on your point of view, but we can't prevent anyone from not utilizing those channels once they're constructed.
I was just curious on the setback side, if it has to what's considered the front yard, what's considered the backyard.
If the walking trail was approved, who is going to maintain that? Is that homeowner again?
That'd be up to the association to work that all out, how they would do that. I don't know how you do the walking trails now. Do they go to the city,
But
or how are they?
that's what I'm saying. If we're going to let you do a walking trail in lieu of sidewalks, I don't think that should become the city's problem to maintain.
I guess, I don't know how you do it in the other developments that have done the same thing.
I'll maintain our own sidewalk. That's what I'm saying. So.
No, well, okay, yeah.
I believe the Mills development on the south part of town, I think they maintain their own trails. That's not a city trail, is it? They didn't, the city didn't accept those trails that run behind those homes. We'd have to look into that. You
I would
remember,
have to
Ken?
look it up.
Yeah, they maintain that themselves down there. That's one where they
Then it'll be
substitute
the
them for
association.
sidewalks.
Yep.
Any other questions for Bob? We'll have you back up here, I'm sure, Bob.
I've got a question. Lot number 1, that huge lot on the west side, southwest side,
The commercial, or,
it says block 3 on top of it, but it's, no.
Oh,
okay, yeah.
What do you propose for that?
Well, absolutely nothing. We've talked about donating it. We talked about a number of things. But I'm still working with the park board as far as deciding what they want to do, whether they want land, and they talked about that at one time, or whether they want,
Block 3 pretty much entails the wetland, doesn't it?
that's the wetland.
That is pretty much the wetland. I think there's
There
some
is
concern
down-
with that.
Down on, well, something like, if I can get this thing to work, about right in here, there's a higher area, but yeah.
But in general, that's the wetland.
Yep, yep.
Not to be included, you don't foresee any development in that area.
Not, yeah,
Okay,
that's
thank
what
you.
we talked about, so.
With that, I'll see if anyone else is here to speak on behalf of it, and then we can start moving forward with heavy lifting.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Doug Alvine with the Kampesca chapter of the Isaac Walton League. And I just got 3 quick points. It's been a long night already. 3 quick points I want to go through on the boat channel at Stony Point. First one is because we believe that the wetland by Stony Point is very valuable and irreplaceable to Lake Kampesca for fisheries production, water filtration, and wildlife habitat, we don't want to see any destruction of this important natural resource. I mean, that's the way we feel. Number 2, if the unfortunate decision is made to build a boat channel, then we feel the channel should come in from the lake to the north, where the old boat channel used to be about 50 years ago. This route would cause less damage to the wetland than going west through the north end of the wetland. And we did discuss this a little bit with the developer, and at the time he said he really didn't want to do that because it would affect one of his lots, and it looks like it's lot number 9. Now, maybe if you combined 8 and 9, maybe there's a way to do that, where you'd come in from the north. And then a third point I want to make, finally, that regardless of the location of the channel, or if the channel is built, we feel it is very important that this wetland be protected from future development and degradation by transferring the wetland and fee title to an entity such as the Lake Kampesca Water Project District, so it can be protected. And one of the serious concerns we have is that when this development is done, there's 3 lots right on the very east side of the wetland. And once those homeowners get in there, they're going to want to start doing stuff to that wetland out in front of their property.
Can you point out which lots you're talking about? In
right down
block
there
2,
along-
in block 2 right there?
Right on the east side, yeah, those 3 lots right there. We have, they're real concerned about future development, and those homeowners are gonna wanna do things. So that's why we think it's important to somehow protect that wetland in the future from any more development than what's already being considered. And we also discussed this with the developer. We met with him and also us in engineering here last week. And it's something he said he would consider. So anyway, something we talked about, but.
When you mentioned the old boat channel, can you show us on there where?
Well, from what I understand is, from what I understand, it'd be right through here. Instead of coming out here, there's a lot of wetlands out, a lot of cattails, out in the wetland here that they're gonna have to go through to get out to the lake and then out through the Hidden Valley channel. From the north, the old ones sound like it come in right through here. And so it would have less impact on the wetland than the one that they're planning. So anyway, that's what we would prefer for the Isaac Walton.
And Doug, if I'm correct, the Game Fish and Parks permit, right where the pointer is, if that area is disturbed at all, that's going to require a permit from Game Fish and Parks.
Well, that's probably a question for Rhett Russell since I'm retired.
Okay.
I
talked to him. I talked to him today, and they told me that.
Okay. There are other permits. When I was in Pierre recently, I met with DNR and Game Fish and Parks, and there are permits that'll you know, they're gonna have to go through, if they build some concrete walls, that's fill in the water, so they'll probably need a 404 for that.
And those 3 lots there, if they disturb that wetland in any way, they'd be required to have the same permitting that's would be required to move through that channel
It probably
too.
depends on what they do, you know, and we're figuring if it's put under the Campesca Water Project District, they could put an easement, a conservation easement on the wetland, so they couldn't do anything to it at all. They'd have to just leave it completely alone.
So your suggestion then with the boat channel then would not come into contact at all with the present wetlands there?
Well, in visiting with Austin, they said it would still cut like a little corner of that wetland if it comes in from the north, but it wouldn't affect it as much as the other one would, the other route would. The negative was that it would affect one of their lots, and anyway.
Jeff, could you put the aerial up of the lake showing what he's talking about, please?
And I will say, I know the park board is gonna take this under consideration maybe as early as next Tuesday. It might be their next meeting after that, and
Anyway, the lot.
they
I mean, right
they
now
may
it-
be interested in using that wetland as a, in lieu of public park dedication, et cetera. I think Bob nodded his head. He's interested in opening discussions with them on that. And I think if that happens, that area, I think it would give everyone a sense of security if
So what-
if
This
an
the
entity
way
is
the
managing that.
Channel would go now. That's what you're wondering, Rhonda?
Right, where would it go?
Yeah, and now it would, the old channel, from what I understand, came in through here.
So you'd create a little island out there, basically?
Yeah, it'd basically probably create an island out there.
Bob, is that little end of that lot there, is that above water right now?
Yes. It's probably, the center of that's probably about where the high water mark is.
Is it high and dry all the time, or is it weedy and full of cattails?
It's dry now. It's dry normally. I suppose if you got to that 1725, it would be full. The way it is, if we cut across this wetland, I think the Corps is probably gonna make us mitigate those acres anyway, so we'll probably have to go down and add more wetland to the south side. So really, it is no net loss of wetlands to that area.
Yeah. Anyway, we prefer they come from the north because it would affect fewer cattails and everything else is part of that wetland when the channel goes right through that to the north there. But okay, thank you.
Does
Thank
Doug, does the Isaac Walton League have any other issues relative to the channel itself and potential runoff of whether it be fertilizers or, you know, waste material, whatever, coming down that channel into the lake?
Yes, I would say we have concerns with all that. And we've talked about that too, but these are the three main points that I wanted to bring up. But there may be others talking about what you're mentioning tonight too. Okay, thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the preliminary plat?
Thanks for having me, or letting me speak anyway. My name's Rhett Russell. I'm a biologist with the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. Last time I was here, I think it was clear back into March. Last time we talked about some of this stuff, I stated that we're obviously opposed to filling of what basically now is Block 3, which is what he originally was planning. And after several meetings and meeting with a lot of different entities, I think we're getting better. We're maybe not quite where we need to be yet. But obviously Game Fish and Parks' main concern is this wetland, this Block 3 area, and how we can best protect that. You know, I stated in the March 19th meeting on all the reasons. Those obviously haven't changed. The plan before Game Fish and Parks for this proposed shoreline alteration right at the channel there where the channel starts going into the lake, that's still under review with Game Fish and Parks. We we know it's better than it was the first go around, but it still has some impacts, and we're still weighing out the pros and the cons to that. Our biggest concern obviously is the wetland. We have no objections to any other part of the development. Once that channel is created, you guys were talking earlier, that does become part of Lake Compesca. So that is an extension of the lake once you create that channel. So he was right in saying that you can't deny access and that kind of stuff to that. Anytime you build a channel into the lake, there's going to be some problems with it. I can guarantee you that, and anybody that lives on Hidden Valley can attest to that. There's going to be algae blooms. There's going to be erosion problems. There's going to be siltation problems. It ends up being quite a bit of maintenance at times. And all that's going to require future permitting and that kind of stuff from the Corps of Engineers and from Game Fish and Parks. The other part that Doug was mentioning also we have concerns with is those 3 lots just to the east of Block 3 there. If this wetland is donated and there's an easement put on it, and we need to figure out somehow of letting the people that possibly could purchase blocks 1, 2, and 3, or those 3 lots there on Block 2, that they're not going to have access to that lake through that wetland. That's just not going to happen. They would have to apply for that individually, and I can tell you right now that those would be denied. So, another point that was brought up is you got to keep in mind, folks, that everything below that ordinary high water mark, no matter what lot it is adjacent to or connects to, when you're donating stuff, that's not part of the donation. That's part of the state of South Dakota already. So keep that in mind when that connects to that big wetland there. If it's below the ordinary high water mark, that's part of the state of South Dakota already. That's already the people's properties. So.
Rhett, what do you think about Doug's idea of the channel coming from the north as opposed to the west? Did that make sense?
It makes some sense. There's still some impacts there. You'd have to measure it out, and we can guess what the impacts are going to be to these wetlands, but we don't know until 10 years down the road what the actual impact is probably going to be. Right now, it's just an acreage impact, but anytime you manipulate one part of a wetland, it's going to affect the rest of it somewhere down the line. So, and Mother Nature has a way of changing things on her own. So when you manipulate one end of the wetland, you don't exactly know how it's going to affect the rest of it. So I think that the biggest concern if I was building a channel here would be, how am I going to keep my channel? It's a heavily windswept lake in a heavily windy part of the world. So, anybody, we work on a lot of bow ramps in the lake, and anybody in Hidden Valley could tell you, you're going to get sediment inside that channel at some point. So,
Ray, you're thinking that the channel coming from the north is a better option environmentally wise because it's taking less less cattails and rushes, or
at the entrance of the lake there, yeah. Nobody knows for sure what that impact difference would be. Right now it's just an acreage difference, but the overall impact to the wetland.
Because now you're having at that point, then you'd have 2, shall we say, accesses to coming in from the lake when the wind is blowing and blowing and et cetera, versus if the channel came out into, I guess was referred to as the Hidden Valley channel, then you would not be exposing,
Yeah. And at one point, that channel to the north there was there. You can already see on this how Mother Nature has changed that some. So, and we also have anytime you have a development along the lake, we're worried about water quality runoff.
So you're again, just if I'm understanding correctly, then so presuming that the development you know, goes, and you've got the channel coming out one direction or the other, but you feel quite strongly that the, what you're calling block 3.
Yeah.
And the adjacent lots should have some serious restrictions or limitations as far as what they could or should be used for. In fact, even to the point of
They're not, the restrictions are already there, is what I'm saying, is if you somehow protect this wetland, the people that buy that adjacent blocks, they're gonna have to apply for the same type of permit that he's applying for now. And what I'm saying, on an individual basis,
Right,
if this wetland is protected, we can't have those three blocks changing the scope of that wetland just because it's their backyard.
But some of them are already, part of those lots are already under the low water, or the high water line, are they not?
Right.
So even by just virtue of building on those lots,
There's certain things they can and cannot do there, yep.
I have people interested in what actually spawns in them wetlands. I had about 3 or 4 people ask me what's back there.
Okay. You know, typically on a lake like Lake Compesca, that area would mostly be crappie that would spawn in that type of aquatic situation. They like the cattails. They like to hang stuff on vegetation. Perch would also be another. Walleyes is more of the rocky substrate, but in high water periods where there's sufficient water back there to the cattails, it'd be predominantly panfish.
Thank you. Is anyone else here to speak on behalf or against in regard to the preliminary plan?
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Paul Hinderaker. I'm the president of the Lake Compesca Water Project District Board of Directors. Other directors who are here today include Greg Blow, Brad Johnson, and Doug Modica. I think that our board would strongly support the comments that have so far been made. Our concerns, as we've kind of written them down, are a little bit more structured, maybe, and I'll just say what they are. The first one is the channel construction entrance. We think that the project should not be approved without specific designs of construction. That entrance includes that 272-foot long finger that we've been hearing about, wondering how that's going to be protected. Is it going to be concrete or something else? We're interested in how much material is going to be moved for excavation of the channel and where is it going. We're curious about whether the developers can show us the excavation and mitigation plans for the channel. And we don't support proceeding until the Lake District has had a chance to review those plans. And we are curious about whether the drainage plan is based on the existing terrain or on the eventual revised grading of the entire project. And then finally, there are a couple or 3 places where they refer to water quality structures. We're curious about what kind of structures they would be and what capacity they would have. I don't think any of our board members is against channels per se, but we think that it's something that has to be done extremely carefully and with much planning and forethought.
Thank you. Any questions, guys, for him?
Paul, when you refer to the 272-foot finger, is that what you said it was? Or whatever he called it?
Yeah.
You're talking about the entire length of the channel then at that point?
Well,
The piece that comes off of lot 7 there.
Just the,
yeah.
so the part that accesses either the Hidden Valley Channel or the lake, whichever direction it would go, that part there is what you're thinking of?
Well, especially that part right there, but, you know, we're worried about encroaching on that wetland, and how you'd protect that with some kind of a defined structure there, like a canal. We're concerned about the actual construction plan, design, of the excavation.
So-
There's a tremendous opportunity to put a whole bunch of silt in the lake.
So earlier you said that was kind of a dirt mound right now, and when I asked him if he was thinking about keeping it dirt or putting cement on it, he said kind of either or. Would you be more in favor of having that cemented out so it doesn't erode or silt in, or what?
I think our board members would prefer that it was a concrete structure to reduce the certainty of siltation.
I think at some point, I mean, I want to listen to any more public input, and I've been kind of patiently waiting because I want to give the commission somewhat of our staff perspective and where we're suggesting some of these issues be addressed. And I guess I'll weigh in when that's appropriate, but I just wanted everybody to know that we have a lot of these same concerns, and we've been visiting with the developer and his engineer about these, and I'll add more input, but I want to finish listening to the public input before I comment.
I'm done. I've said my piece.
Thank you.
Bob, did you have a comment on the finger?
Well, maybe Rod could kind of explain that channel a little better, maybe you understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm Rod DeYoung with Austin Engineering. You know, in our 404 permit applications, what we got to do is not only look at mitigation for that area going through that into that existing channel, but the Corps is going to require detailed plans of what we're going to build that channel of, what we're going to do for the sidewalls, you know, whether it be concrete walls or a concrete monster block or something to that effect. And of course, you know, when we get into the construction phase of, we're going to have to protect any waters from sedimentation that would be a result of construction. That's through the South Dakota Department of Environmental and Natural Resources. And all these people are going to require us to have detailed plans, what we're going to do with our excavation, the construction methods, the timing of things, and a sequence of operations. They're going to require us to submit that. You know, so right now we are in the preliminary plan stages of it, but we got to give them details to them people in order to get approval for it. So, because they're going to have to advertise, notify appropriate people with them kind of things, so.
You said that's all included in the 404 filing?
That's in the 404, yes,
Now,
with the Corps of
you have
Engineers.
already submitted that to the Corps, or
Pardon?
you have already submitted that?
We have submitted, we've had a few comments back, and we got to respond to them. And we're working with a wetland specialist out of Volga with this stuff. And, you know, well, I mean, if you're going to have to mitigate, you've got to mitigate like kind of wetlands, because there's different kind of wetlands that we're dealing with here.
So I'm unfamiliar with the document, but is that kind of a give and take? You haven't defined what you're going to do with that finger yet, or you
We have
are-
defined it, but they still got questions, you know, some unknowns that they want to have on that, so.
So right now, you're planning on having some kind of concrete structure or a block?
Yes, we
structure?
are, and I've had it provided that to them already.
From the questions that Mr. Hinderaker asked, are all those addressed in the 404?
Yes, it is.
I think what we'll find is between the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, when it comes to the dredging of that shoreline, that's kind of their expertise. The other areas is the Corps' expertise. Some of those bodies are waiting for us to rule.
Right.
And they
before they move too much further on that. I think we can rest assured that in the resolution, we've spelled out the points of that nothing can move forward until those bodies have made their decisions on what we move forward with today. I spoke personally to Game Fish and Parks today, and they said, yeah, we've got it, but we're kind of waiting to see what you guys are going to do before we move any further. So it's kind of a team effort. I can also say, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but I think that wetland at first, they thought about doing something different with that, and that's not going to be the case. We still have park dedication in this project, and I think we can possibly take a look or make a recommendation to the park board that they take that wetland in lieu of park dedication possibly. And then if the owner wants to deed that to the city can then lease that to a conservation entity of some sort. We talked a little bit about that today. There's some options out there. I don't think there's any question that this board, the Corps of Engineers, Game Fish and Parks, and the owners are going to protect that wetland to the best that we can. I think that's a big point with most people in here is what are you going to do with the wetland, how are you going to get it with the channel. The Plan Commission hasn't got to roll up its sleeves on what we do, and that is the interior of this project. We have 15, 16, 17 resolutions that the developer will require to agree to before we move forward with the resolution. I think at this point what we'll do is I'll get with Jeff and Shane, and we'll kind of go through some of these areas. I think first the Plan Commission's going to have some questions on sidewalk. We touched on them earlier, and we keep bouncing back to the wetlands and the channels, but we touched on what we do is sidewalks, curb gutter, drainage, the quality control structures. We'll go through some of that. I think some of the board has some questions and some concerns with the developer on that. With that, I'll turn it over. The public hearing's still open. I don't want to close it in case we have questions for anyone else out there, but I want the board to take a look at this layout and determine what questions we have with the developer. I mean, we can start it from top to bottom and say, where are the deal breakers? Let's start with them right away and go, this is where some of the board members feel strongly versus what the landowner feels strongly, and move forward from that and then get into the resolutions. Merlin?
Hi, Merlin Joyce, and I'm with a number of homeowners from Hidden Valley, and we're pretty happy to hear that some of the things that are going on tonight, and we commend the work, because our biggest concern was that Block 3, or that, what lot is Block 3? And if that's going to be, as I heard Bob say, not be developed at all.
That'll be undisturbed.
Yeah, we will be really happy, because we don't want to see that changed and want anybody to put anything on it. But tonight I saw an easement drawn on the map that I hadn't seen before, and it brings up a question we talked about earlier about easements or access. Now, I had not seen it, but I assume that's a water line that was put across that area. Is that right, Rod? It's on one of the first plans. But the original thought was, move it up a little, that red one right there, over the corner. This one? Yeah.
That's for a water line easement.
That's a water line easement. That's an easement, though, not an access.
Right.
I didn't know the difference. I didn't associate the difference till earlier tonight, so that's an easement. And then we want to also echo our support of coming in from the north. That was a natural waterway, and I would hope Bob would be able to figure out a way to consider that rather than coming through our channel. We have some prejudice on that, and if he could do that, it would make everybody in Hidden Valley happy, and we'd hope that you would consider having him look at that again and see if that's a possibility. So those are the things that I think that we have a concern for, and a lot of it's been taken care of already, so thank you for the time. Anybody else have anything from Ron?
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Ron Shimitz. I live in 863 Hidden Valley Drive, and I am on the channel side. I was the one that coordinated and orchestrated the completion of the seawalls in Hidden Valley in 2012, and then we dredged it out in the spring of 2013. So I do have some experience with channel building and maintenance, if you will. And I did, by the way, get all the permits. There were 7 of them in total to do that project, so I'm familiar with that process also. The only thing I would add to what Merlin said is that I know how disruptive it is when you do concrete walls, especially as it comes into contact with Lake Compesca water. And things like, we put in cofferdams and de-watered our channel. We put in silt screens across the mouth of the channel. What I'm saying is we had no access as channel owner or lot owners on the channel to boat traffic during that construction phase. Now, we did it very late in the fall of 2012, November of 2012, for the concrete seawalls, and then we did the dredging in the spring, early spring of 2013, meaning minimal disruption to boat traffic up and down Hidden Valley Channel. So, if the proposal is to use that access to go through the wetlands and use that current access, there will be, points of disruption for boat traffic to the existing lot owners in Hidden Valley. So just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you. Let's go over the design plan from a board standpoint as to what you guys have questions with. Anything you saw that was submitted to us as far as road widths, lot depths, sidewalks, trails. Any issues you guys have with the plan? Anything you want to talk about? Because when we make a motion, the motion has to entail everything that we want on there if we're going to make any changes. If one person doesn't like something and votes against the motion, the whole project can come to a screeching halt.
Yeah, can I just say
go
a
ahead, Shane.
few words, Pat? Yeah, what we as a staff, as we try to prepare these plans, or we're not preparing, I'm reviewing these plans to bring forward to the commission. Essentially, our job is to kind of make sure that the basic concepts and acceptable practices are addressed within our community, and there are a few things in this plan that are different, uniquely different from other portions of town, and so the developer has strayed away from our typical sections, which require the curb and gutter, and ultimately then designed storm sewers and all that stuff. And so what we have to step back, and we're letting the commission weigh in on these changes to our typical sections, and we will advise, and of course you make the ultimate decisions. One other thing I want to point out, and we kind of get really detailed in these plans, but these are plan concepts. They are not final design things, and I think what we need to do is make sure that all of the concepts are addressed and concerns that impact those concepts, but ultimately the final design will come down the line later, and so part of our review, we rely heavily on that 404 permit, which includes the Corps of Engineers, all of the state game fish and parks, and all those entities. So we are planning on making recommendations that the development agreement gives us leverage to incorporate any comments that come out of that 404 permitting purpose, because we don't know what the design parameters are yet to overcome any of those issues. So there's a lot of things that we as staff are going to recommend that we write into a development agreement that address all of these open-ended things that we can't react to yet because we haven't seen a final design. So really, from a staff standpoint, we've been focusing on the concepts and whether the concepts meet certain aspects of our review process and what the community wants. So just keep that in mind when you weigh in on these. We haven't seen final designs, nor will we for quite some time yet. But.
And in those final designs, the final designs that we haven't seen, they'll each have they each be addressed in the development agreement with them.
Yep, that's
in those, right now we have 18 18 points in the resolution that we want added to the development agreement.
Correct. I mean, all of those
And we'll go
18
through
have been
those.
pointed to a lot of the concerns that were brought forward tonight,
So what Shane's saying is the
Let's go through it.
design review team, they've done a lot of the work in here. It's just some of the fine tuning that, from the board that they'd like some, I don't want to say advisement on, but if correction or an adjustment or a recommendation from us. And what will happen is I'll start going through it with, well, let's first, I want to ask the board, I still think we have to take a look at the overall design of it. Trails versus sidewalks with the road. I think most of the drainage issues, we can, I can ask Shane while I have you here, one of the maps showed some drainage facilities. I don't think people quite understand what a drainage facility is.
Yeah, this development's a little bit unique in that it does, all of the land currently drains almost directly to the lake already. And so typically those facilities are intended to be detention of rain, before you release it, and also quality control things. And really there's no need to detain any water because it's essentially water that flows directly into the lake. But it is important to maintain certain aspects and design things. In other words, we want all of this water that drains off of the property to at least flow through some green space to collect the sediment and some of the particulate pollutants that would normally make it into the lake prior to discharging into the lake. In other words, we're not planning on too many direct storm sewer outlets into this channel or to the lake proper without some type of treatment. But we aren't going to be able to detain water like we would out in a flatter, larger portion of town. And it makes this site a little bit unique. There's just not room to realistically store water as it doesn't have, essentially there's no drainage impact on anybody. We're not going to flood anybody per se. So as long as we control the rate of runoff, and they've changed the plans significantly to address runoff to the east side of their development. So I hope that their final designs, will minimize our impact on the neighbors.
So Shane, when this is all cement and roads and whatever else, and we get a 3 or 4 inch rain like we just had, that water is gonna be able to be contained and it won't just go south and, it looks like everything's gonna wanna run south, and there's some people that are gonna have some places down at that end on this property, but also on the property to the south.
Right.
Will they end up with a 3 inch or 4 inch rain with all the same thing the city's worried about up north here with the new school and the
Right.
new.
So the grading plan will essentially make sure that this water sheds in between properties instead of straight at somebody. Essentially, you can't, there's no place to hold water here. You're on top of a hill, it sheds water pretty much every direction.
And the storage facilities that are highlighted there, those are basically low-lying green areas. They're not,
Correct.
it's not a building, it's not it's nothing mechanical, it's natural.
That's correct. So really, the grading plan has to essentially route the water through the development to the lake in between homes.
So does the concept of curb and gutter that Dan referred to earlier, does that make this natural drainage, or as they develop it for the runoff, does that make it more practical than to do the ditches thing that they were talking about before?
In a way, yes. Because anytime you put the curb and gutter on it, you're then now channelizing the water to localized spots. So you're going to get a higher flow of water quicker to those low points that you create that you have to design in. And that's where, actually, from an engineering perspective, in this type of development, I'm willing to forego curb and gutter as a, I will never say that as a rule we should eliminate curb, but in this development, sheet flow of water is actually beneficial to all those properties.
So you opened up that can. Let's talk on that. Curb and gutter versus a ditch and a swale. What type of a ditch and a swale, maybe Rod can help us with that too, is I too am, hey, curb and gutter, everybody around this development has had to do it. Their developments are of a similar size, but in this particular case, because the way the water runs off, I told you last time that you're gonna have to talk us into no curb and gutter and using a swale and tell us why it's better in this application than it would be.
Yeah, and I would
in the
defer
past.
that to Rod.
5 minutes. I've missed supper.
What?
Again.
Well, if you look at this, the bottom section there is what we're talking about there, what we want to use there is a kind of a rural type section, what we're using. And what we planned is use a really flat slope there of 8-to-1 and then a 4-to-1 before we get to that rec trail on the backside. And the depth will be 1.5 foot so that we would have the ability to have culverts in for the approaches off the homes. Now with that type of a roadway there, you know, every driveway will have a pipe. So you have consequence from that is that you have detention with that pipe because it does naturally block the water, but yet we'll still be able to handle the storm runoff flows that we're looking at. And then with that grass channel, or swale that we would say, it'll be just like any other ditch that you have, like in front of my place. I live out there on 4th Avenue. When the water runs through that ditch, you know, the grass does somewhat filter that water, but yet we'll still have these water control, the control features for treating the waters when we get to these areas and low spots. Then in them spots, we would have outlet structures in there to, you know, get it into the lake as for the high flows into that. But them flows in them control structures would have pipes coming in underneath of a couple feet of sand and peat mixture for treating that water. Then it flows into that pipe and then eventually outlets the Lake Compesca. So, and we're localized them each locations, pick that out so it would work. So you know you gotta, you know, like the north end's high, you got kind of a high spot there to the where that one cul-de-sac is, and in the south end is where we have that other cul-de-sac. That's the 3 high points of the property, and it all collects down there, you know, at these locations for outlet.
When this development was first proposed, it was emphasized as such a rural nature and all this, so people tried to sell it as, oh, we can have narrower roads, we don't need to have all our infrastructure. But this is a development like any other development in the city of Watertown. And to be fair to all the other developers in the city of Watertown, we made them put in 37-foot roads and curb and gutter and sidewalks, and I don't see why we should, you know, cut a deal on this development. I mean, there's 61 acres south of Mr. Arnold that's for sale right now. Are we gonna say, oh, you don't have to follow the rules on that one either? I still think we should have the 37-foot wide streets. We should have sidewalks. You could talk a little farther to see whether curb and gutter, I don't know, but my line in the sand, I don't think a bike path on a little of that is adequate. I think we should have sidewalks through the entire, and 37-foot wide streets. I don't think we need to be cutting special deals because this is such a special development.
I think that there's a logical argument from what Shane had shared, that the ditch drainage, you know, you can make a logical argument for that. I don't think that there's a logical argument for that this is a rural development. In fact, one could argue that this is actually more complex than many developments that come across. So I would be inclined also with the 37-foot wide roads.
Bob, your thoughts on increasing the road width 37 feet. Public hearing's still open, so
Well, I think with 37 feet, you definitely get more runoff as far as water off of a hard
I mean, because the
surface.
right-of-way is still 66
You
feet.
still have the right-of-way.
We still have the
66.
right-of-way is still 66.
Before, I was doing a 10-foot trail with a 26-foot road. And so I was doing 36 feet. Just in a different form. I just not I mean, with the gentle slopes that we have on these roads, I'm just not sure it needs to be that wide. From a parking standpoint, it's pretty easy to park on a slope that's that gradual. But I guess that's your decision. We'll have to live or not live with what you decide, I guess.
I mean, I understand what, I have the same thought on the development to the south, development to the east and west. We have curb gutter sidewalks in those. I do understand the swale. I can see the water going through that and the water being held up and slowed down. I've had areas where I asphalted or cemented after it was gravel, and it's amazing how fast the water can move through a concrete pipe. And what we want to do is keep that water as clean as reasonably possible before it ends up in its final resting point. We have spots all over the lake where storm sewers drop right into the lake. Highway 20 has some spots where the pipes go right under the lake. So, I mean, it happens, but we need to minimize what gets into that lake as best we can. On the trails, Bob, you know, I looked from the outside looking in. I went, why you want to put trails in there? You can sell the lots to people. They have to put the sidewalk in. You're going to have to pay for the trail.
I know, but the look that you have with the trails there already on the lots, they already have a place going when they buy their lots. It makes them a lot more appealing, I think.
The advantage
Aesthetics and otherwise.
the advantage of playing both sides of the argument is the trails are in. The last sidewalk gets put in when the last lot gets developed.
Exactly.
Sidewalks to nowhere on 19th Street have driven me nuts for 20 years, and finally there's no sidewalks to nowhere on 19th Street anymore. The advantage of that, you know, like I said, playing both sides of the argument, I like sidewalks on both sides of the street everywhere. I've lived in areas where there aren't sidewalks, and when I go to the northeast part of town and I see that's a form of communication with people. But I do also like the concept of that on day one, the walking trail is there.
I live on North Lake Drive, and we have a walking trail now there. It's fantastic. As far as people riding their bikes, and as far as people walking, and as far as people doing everything. So whereas a narrow sidewalk would make that impossible with their bikes, and otherwise it'd be a mess. But
Well, you said
just my
yourself,
feelings.
you're going a 10-foot wide bike trail. And what are they in town, 6 in town? 8?
Or maybe it's
Okay.
8. That might be.
Well,
what
your
he decided
your
to. He
plot
might have
shows 10.
decided an 8.
Yeah.
I don't know what he used. So.
No, I was just curious. But my point is, just like Pat said, the sidewalk kind of goes nowhere on 19th. I would much rather see, if we're going to go with a trail, that it reach up to your commercial lot up there and make that complete loop. So if someone is out on a walk, they aren't just going to come to a dead end and have to turn around. To utilize that C1 lot up there.
Well, technically, that wasn't my development, but the north one, that's.
Well, yes,
Scott
but you
Munger's.
could follow your Stony Point Road
But-
right around that outside loop, all the way around.
Stony Point Second Edition is required to have sidewalk when it's finished. So that's not part of Bob's development, but that is in the previous, if you go back to the previous Plan Commission directives, there is to be sidewalk up there on that portion of Stony Point, correct, Jeff?
Yeah, that's in the development agreement with Stony Point Second Edition. Sidewalks on both sides.
You know, one of the things, and I don't want to keep beating the sidewalk and curb and gutter, but one of the things that on the city council that I hear the most of is these developments, no matter where they are in town, do not have sidewalks, and they do not have curbs, and they do not have gutters. And it's going to come back to haunt us, I think, if we deviate from what's required, because we're going to hear from people that say, why in the world did we not do it, or why did we not follow what we make everybody else do? I think.
I think the problem out there, Dan, though, you know, I agree with all that, but that's a whole different place out there where we don't want, the more hard surface we have out there, the more it's gonna run, you know, into the lake. I come from, I'm the president out of Glacial, or Pickerel Lake, South End Association over there. We still have gravel roads out there. We got ditches, and that's one of the cleanest lakes in the state because I think it's kept its naturalism out there. That's just my point, that the less hard surfaces out there, the less stuff that's gonna run in the lake. Every time we build a house out at Pickerel, then we get a bunch of runoff. So some of that's gotta be stopped when they do that because there's no drainage system out there, but they're trying to come up with a way to slow it down out there, which I think is a good idea. I don't agree on the street sizes, but I do agree on that ditch system that they were talking about out there because I think that'll help out a whole heck of a lot.
I'm Sharon Shimitz. I live in Hidden Valley. And I can't remember who made the comment about you're going to drive in there and you're automatically going to turn to see what's been developed up there. We call them in Hidden Valley looky-looks. And Hidden Valley's been there a long time. And wide roads, I have no idea how wide Hidden Valley is. But if you come in there on graduation, you can barely get in. It's a one-way in, and you hope nobody else is coming the other way. You come the 4th of July, it's the same way. If somebody has construction, I mean, the roads are blocked, so narrow roads are a problem. It's nice, it is more of a rural, but it definitely is a detriment to a lot of people that live there with the narrow roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane, let's run through Shane and Jeff. Go ahead, Bob.
If I might, Pompeska Hidden Valley is 26 feet. That's what you just asked.
Okay, thanks. Let's, Shane and Jeff, let's run through, the resolution has 18 points in there of items that need to be included in the development agreement. Let's run through them one by one. We should be able to move quickly through them. I'll read them, Jeff, and we'll ask you the clarification on it. Item number 1 was the property. These are things that have to be included in the development agreement that the developer must sign before anything can move forward. The first thing is the property has to be platted within 3 years. If we go through all this process, agree to everything, he signs the agreement and never takes the plat up and has it registered, it reverts back to what it was. That's simple enough. Item number 2 is Stony Point Drive shall be installed from the Prairie Hills end of Stony Point Drive cul-de-sac in phase 1 of the construction of the development, including the portion located front of Stony Point Second Edition. The developer must agree to maintain and provide snow removal on any gravel streets as private streets until such times the streets are paved and accepted by the city. It's
Okay,
another
I want
thing. Go
to
ahead.
weigh in on that one. Now, in this review, of course, we're looking primarily at what is actually included in the footprint of Stony Point Third Edition. The road that was just referred to lays outside of Stony Point Third Edition and has a whole different path to approval. And we've discussed that a little bit with the developer and his engineer, that we agree to the concept, but there's certain aspects of that road and its design and impacts on the property that's going to be purchased or owned.
So basically what
have to
that
be met
says
as
is
well.
what we're going through is the top half of that block, the road that
Correct.
snakes through there. It's included in the development agreement, but the exact dynamics of that road are to be determined at a later date.
Correct.
Okay. Item number 3, the developer shall install an alternative trail system as shown in the approved preliminary plan in lieu of sidewalks on both sides of the street. The alternative trail system must be installed in conjunction with Stony Point Drive. And from a board member standpoint, once we go through these, a person can, we can talk as a board and say, we want to scratch this, change this. We can make modifications on this sheet, and then this sheet is part of the motion as to what we approve or disapprove. So item number 3 is the trails versus sidewalks. issue. Item number 4, no plat will be recorded until the park dedication requirement has been met to the satisfaction of the park board in accordance with ordinance section 14.0120 and defined by the development agreement. What that means is in any development, there needs to be park dedication that needs to be approved by the park board, and that's a little bit of a work in progress. The park board hasn't seen this particular plat yet, and what happens is no plat can be recorded until the developer and the park board agree to where the park dedication is, or in this case, block 3 over there in that wetland may play in on item number 4. That'll be down the road. Item number 5 is that the developer is required to obtain all SDD and R stormwater permits. That's standard in everything. No fill permit, dredging permit. Item number 6, no fill permit, dredging permit, or building permit impacting the proposed lake channel will be allowed until the U.S. Corps of Engineers and the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks have issued permits which would allow the creation of the proposed channel. Item number 7, I think we went over 6 extensively. Item number 7, the developer is required to enter into a development agreement with the city to include the installation of required public improvements to Stony Point Drive, Hunk Potty Circle, the maintenance and ingress-egress easements between lots 2, 3 of Stony Point. Will you pull that one up and explain what that one is?
Well, it's saying, sorry. It's saying that the developer is responsible for, installing the roads. This is Stony Point Drive, the main one, and then this is Hunk Potty Circle. That's the name of the cul-de-sac. And then, the easement that's mentioned is this easement, and that's needed to be a secondary route for ingress and egress for safety concerns. Anytime there's a development that has more than a potential of 30 units, and you have to look at like a R3, for example, could have a 12-plex or more. So like this whole area has the potential for more than 30 units. There needs to be 2 ways in and out according to fire code. And obviously Stony Point Drive is one of them, but then this easement would be the other one. So they have to agree to make sure that's maintained and usable in case of emergency if a fire truck or ambulance were to
Okay,
use
thank you.
it.
Item number 8, the developer shall be responsible for maintaining the gravel egress easement so that emergency access vehicles are assured at all times. That's that side one that comes over from South Lake Drive. Like we said, that's so that in the event of an emergency, if there's a fire on the south end of that property, the north people can still get out. Number 9, water quality control facilities will be designed and constructed in accordance with the city's BMP manual. We talked about that earlier as to what a water control facility was. Item number 10, water control facilities must be constructed within the recorded easements outside the public right-of-way. What that means is the public right-of-way, you can't put the control facility on that. It needs to be put on the developer's property. Item number 11, these are standard in all of our development agreements. Item number 11, easements will be obtained in channels constructed by the developer to continue to contain and safely convey the 100-year flood flow rates from the site to the receiving water body prior to recording any plat. Explain that a little bit.
That goes back to what Shane was mentioning, that during the final plans when they do their grading, they have to show that the water's going to flow between properties, in designed easements to get to where it needs to go.
So that's saying any water that's coming from that property, if it ends up on someone else's property, they need to have an easement that would safely convey a 100-year flood. That's protecting the property owners on all sides, that one property owner's not dumping all their water onto the other.
Yeah, and in this case, there's still concerns, but typically what that item addresses is when you run a large storm, say you collected it all in a storm sewer system and you were just dumping it out of one pipe towards somebody else, you want to make sure that that's metered so where that someone else is only receiving a portion of that water over time, not just getting it all shoved on them at once. So it's still important to have in here, but it's a lot less significant from a standpoint, we're not gonna be directing a lot of storm sewers to properties outside of this development.
Thank you. Number 12, no building permits will be issued until the road is constructed through the Prairie Hills Development Second Edition. I want to clarify something on this is this is basically saying we're not going to issue any building permits until that road's constructed. The level of construction, in many cases, we like a gravel road for a while so it can settle. Is this road considered no building permits will be issued until the gravel road is constructed or a paved road?
Well, the level of service, of course, depends on what activities up there. Ultimately, if there's occupancies given, that's gonna trigger probably a paved road sooner. In other words, if all of the lots are under construction, but there's nobody living up there, the life safety aspect of getting the fire department and the ambulance up there is a lot lower than after it starts to finish. So that's the point of time what that needs to be paved at is really dependent on how fast the area develops. But certainly we would want to have a paved path sooner than later, but we're not gonna wait till the last house is built to
And on a
pave it,
side note
but-
there, if I was a developer, soon as that road is built to city standards, it'll get turned over to the city.
Right.
And then the city will assume snow removal and routine maintenance
Correct.
on it. So most developers try to get that
Well-
to a point where they can turn it over to the city as
Right,
fast as they
but from
can.
a city standpoint too, we would like a majority of the construction traffic to be winding down before we actually pave that. Otherwise, we're taking over a road that's been beat to smithereens with concrete trucks and delivery trucks and all that stuff.
So the stage of turning it over is between you and the city engineering staff and the developer?
Correct.
Okay. And that, again, that's something why we put it in the development agreement. The development agreement, in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any items on here, and everything would be in stone, and we would leave less up, we put less burden on our city staff to make the call on this. In this particular situation, we probably have a lot more than normal on here, but a lot of that expertise we leave at the staff level. Item number 13, the development agreement shall address any maintenance activities that will occur within any wetland and shall be spelled out and shall spell out a wetland mitigation plan identifying the amount and location of any wetland that shall be created. You want to explain that, Shane?
Yeah, we put that in there. Of course, it's open-ended because we don't know what the 404 recommendations are gonna be. So in other words, the alignment of this channel entrance, for instance, greatly impacts what that's actually gonna be. So we're kind of leaving that in there to be, cover ourselves for
So it's a bit of a
reaction.
safety net. You know,
Yep,
John
yep.
made the comment, do we have the authority to do that? Once you see the word wetland, but what this is actually a second safety net.
Right, we're
underneath
making
that.
sure that any wetlands that are impacted are properly mitigated. And I think that that's been fairly clear throughout the discussion of the process.
Item number, okay, thank you. Item number 14, the development agreement shall specify that the final plans shall include a computer-aided hydraulic module analysis of the subdivision's historic and post-development drainage patterns.
And that goes back to your, making sure the water flows where it needs to. It's it's a final plant design stage item that states that we need to know where the water's going under certain conditions. So that's what that is.
Item number 15 is why Mark's been sitting here all night, right, Mark? The water main shall provide adequate looping and be constructed in accordance with Watertown's municipal utilities? You're good with that?
Yeah.
Oh, I figured.
State something on it that
Heck, why not?
with the channel being built, something's gonna have to be done with the existing water mains, because once the channel will go across the existing water main. So whether the water main is lowered to go under the channel, but we need to keep a loop for water quality.
And what that does is that's between the developer and municipal utilities work that out.
Yeah, because
Under the supervision of our staff.
Our main's in an easement, so we have
Okay.
permission to have it where it is.
Okay, thank you. Item number 16, the final approved preliminary plan shall be revised to exclude any development within Prairie Hills Development Second Edition. A revised preliminary plan for Prairie Hills Second Edition shall be submitted and shall show the location and layout of Stony Point Drive.
Well, first I want to say for everyone
Okay,
who,
what that is where Shane had mentioned earlier, we're only talking about Stony Point Second Edition. We're leaving that road to the south, which has its own route to get to where it needs to go as far as dynamics of that, correct?
yeah, and I also just want to mention that 16 through 18 were added after the agenda went out, so I apologize for anyone who looked online at the agenda and didn't see these three conditions in the resolution.
And the reason 16 was added in is there are some existing agreements that we didn't know about until late in the game between the developer of Prairie Hills and the developer of Stony Point Second Edition as to exactly how, where, and when that road will be constructed there, and we're comfortable with that. We may tackle that at a later date, or it might not be necessary.
Yeah, and I didn't want to blindside the developer and his engineer, but that's exactly right. We didn't know that there were previous commitments in that agreement to purchase the land and construct a road on there, so we want to be able to make sure that we as a staff review that and incorporate the design through that segment to accommodate what was agreed to or any modifications thereof that come forward out of this process as well.
Item number 17 is the final approved preliminary plan shall be revised to include appropriate numbering of all plan sheets, all proposed zoning designations, a typical section of the proposed channel, a typical section for the 16-foot wide emergency route and trail. Shane, what is that?
Well, essentially, they had some of those things in a previous version of our review that we did, and then some of them kind of got lost because at the last minute, we actually, the packet that we handed out to you, we just received this week, and so there was a few details that kind of got left out or missed. And all I'm asking for there is that the plans get fine-tuned a little bit, because I want to make sure that the record plans that go forward or stay in this process are accurate. I don't want something that's kind of got a few little glitches here or there to be construed as
Meaning we've looked at so much stuff and tweaked and modified and
Right.
given personal opinions that you
Yep.
want to make sure that you get a final plan that has gathered everything in, so there's no questions as to who said what and who agreed to
right.
what.
Yeah, it's kind of making sure grammar is correct.
Thank you. And item number 18, the typical section of the 16-foot wide emergency route and rec trail shall have 3 inches of asphalt over 9 inches of base trail. That happens to be that trail that crosses through blocks 1 and 2. It's actually part of the walking trail, but it doubles as that emergency route. That's the escape route in the event of an emergency for the north half of that development.
yeah, and there'll be some utilities located within there also, so that's why we wanted the extra thickness to allow for if a maintenance truck had to drive on it or something.
And it's uncommon to have 18 notes in a resolution, but in this case, it's a rather complicated step, especially with the channel, the DENR, and the Corps of Engineers. We normally don't involve that many people in a preliminary plan. Questions for the board on that? Conda, I saw you came up. Do you have a question or comment? The public hearing's still open.
Conda Williams. I have Stony Point. I'm still concerned about the easement road, the traffic on the easement road. I'm very concerned about the runoff. Mr. Drake keeps telling me that that's not his property, that it's Mr. Munger's property, and what is happening there isn't his concern or doesn't involve his development. I understand that he owns some of the lots that are right on that property. I invite any of you to come out and look at my property. I am very disappointed in the way the runoff is occurring and what is happening to my property, what is happening to my people in my campground because of the development. You are the experts. I'm not. I have to abide by what you're going to say and what you're going to do, and I will respect those if I can. Thank you.
While we're on that subject, Rod, we can ask you on where Stony Point Drive goes north and south, because right now we're talking about Stony Point 2. What Conda was alluding to is the original Stony Point second edition is at the top. Her property abuts both of those. There's been an exorbitant amount of runoff coming off that. I've been up there and looked at it, and there's 2-foot trenches cut through there again. Where Stony Point Drive goes north and south, I was told it's going to be built up on the east side, a berm where all the water that comes off Stony Point Drive will run to the west.
What we're gonna do here, Pat, is bring the water down here. We're gonna put a culvert right in here and intercept this. And we're gonna put what we call a ditch block in there to prevent that water from going down there. Yeah, we are raising this grade through here. And we're also putting a little berm on this side with a little swale in between to get the water down to here and then coming across with it. And the same way here with this pipe putting in here, we're gonna bring the water down this size to come into that water quality control feed.
So that's in the new area. It looks like you guys, from a drainage standpoint, are trying to move everything on yours. Tell me about the box up to the north. Is that going to help what is currently draining off that large lot there?
This lot right here.
Mm-hmm. That box, where you said there's a box that comes down, does that have anything to do with that lot at all?
I don't.
Block, the drainage block.
The drainage block? The drainage block?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, does that do anything to impact what's currently draining off Stony Point Second?
Presently, it does right now because it does all run down here, but we're trying to force the water down this way, along that way. So I was just out there today, and it looks like we gotta address that again here. So
But the idea is that water there will also move down?
All come down this
Okay.
direction here.
What's an estimated, well, I guess I can't tell you what an estimated time frame of that is. I mean, it happens when it happens, I guess.
Yeah, and we're gonna put in some additional silt fence up here too, for
Okay.
controlling what's going into the lake. So, and around the topsoil piles that are there now, so.
So
All right,
you'd-
thank you.
So Rod, you'd feel comfortable reassuring Mrs. Williams that once the property's developed, that is to say that what she's experiencing now with the property not being developed is not what it will be like after the property is
Once-
developed.
Right now is the most vulnerable it is under construction, but once we get it developed and get it seeded and grassed and get the culverts in there, then it should be all contained within Mr. Drake's property going to the south.
Rod, Shane, over here.
Excuse me.
The construction work that's going on now is actually in the previous Stony Point addition, correct?
That's correct.
Right, so, I mean, so we just need to make sure that we avoid the same issue from reoccurring for Mrs. Williams.
That's correct.
On this project.
And we're gonna pay particular attention to that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brad.
Brad Johnson with the Lake Kempeska Water Project District, and we just learned some more about drainage plans that we're not aware of before. Now you're bringing drainage artificially down into that area because, you know, in contrast to your statement earlier that we're not going to create any more drainage coming off of this lot, we're actually creating quite a bit more because now we've created a channel coming all the way back in, and we're routing all the flows into that channel. So when it comes in quickly in a 100-year event, from the Lake Kempeska Water District standpoint, we want to make sure that those water control facilities are big enough to handle a 100-year event because the 100-year impact goes straight into the lake. And that's our concern. And now we're going to bring it down from a commercial lot, which are going to have pervious parking. So you've got issues that we are concerned about that we want to make sure are clearly addressed by the time it gets developed.
Water control facilities, are they 100-year events or?
The 100-year event is to control more of flooding rather than water quality, because that's a larger event. Water quality things are to take care of your day-to-day showers. I mean, if you read the MS4 program, anything that exceeds a 1-inch rain is not designed, or I mean, those controls are not designed to contain the larger storm events. It's actually for the low flow, small events. And so that's what these water quality facilities are really made for. Now, when you start to talk about the detention level of stormwater management, that is intended to hold the larger events and prevent areas from flooding. And then we're not really worried about flooding in this development.
In our code, they're required to control the day-to-day event, not necessarily a 100-year flood.
For treatment, for water quality treatment, they can't, nobody can build a facility big enough to, Lake Compesca is a 100-year storage facility. But for the water quality, you want to take care of the everyday, like the showers we've been getting, you want to make sure that those are treated and released adequately.
All right, from a board standpoint, those are the items on the resolution as far as this. If there's any details in that plan we want to discuss with the developer and have him agree to change before we vote, because when we vote, we're voting on the resolutions plus any additional modifications we're going to request him to make on his preliminary plan. And with that, I'll close the public hearing and let the board talk directly to the developer if they have a question.
Well, I'll start off. In this resolution agreement we have here, we don't have anything on the width of the streets. And I still have to go back to a 37-foot wide street. And also would like to, I don't know how you put it in here, but get block 3 into some type of a issue, because that's, and maybe the park.
Block 3, I think we can lean on the side of the Park and Rec Board for that. Luckily, I'm the vice president of that board. We'll meet on Tuesday, and I'll bring that up to them. There's been some discussion of working with the developer in regard to where the park dedication is going to be, or whether there'll be a cash in lieu of the park dedication, and maybe Block 3 can come into that conversation.
Okay. And also too, after hearing the latest issues on the runoff, and everybody's gonna develop these lots, and they're all gonna have really nice green grass, and they're gonna fertilize that grass, and it's gonna rain, and it's gonna run into the lake. And if all that runs right into the fishery habitat area, that's not gonna be good for the fish. So maybe I would like to see, when we make this recommendation, that we strongly recommend to the city council that they look at a north channel access.
Mark, you had hit your light.
With the set aside, with Block 3, there was also concerns about those adjoining lots, since they butted right up to those. Is that going to be part of the Park and Rec evaluation of that?
No, essentially when those properties are purchased, that homeowner's gonna fall into responsible for protecting that wetland.
Jeff, will you pull that one? We have a map that shows exactly how much of those lots, those 3 north-south lots, how much of that actually protrudes into the wetland. And I actually, when I was had a conversation with Game Fish and Parks today, that came up, and I asked that. I said, well, what can they do? He said they can't do anything. They have to do the exact. See, that's how much of the land that the yellow line there. That's how much of their lots actually protrude into the wetland. 2 of those lots, it's virtually none. One of those lots, it bends in there a little bit, which means they'd have cattails kind of up against their back edge of their yard. before they could do any shoreline restoration of any sort, they need the same permits from Game and Fish that is needed to dig out that channel. So I'm comfortable with block 3, not so much. At first I thought we're gonna have to include some of those lots like you did until I looked closely at it when there's really not that much.
Right. One thing to consider is whether a buffer is appropriate there too, you know, maybe have them use a different kind of vegetation in the last 10 feet or so, right abutting those wetlands, maybe. I mean,
Say that again.
maybe a buffer of some sort that's not typical lawn, could be entertained there. I mean, you know, don't do bluegrass right to the water's edge. Maybe have a 10-foot buffer of some other vegetation that protects it better.
Or rock landscaping, that type of thing,
Rock, not so much, but vegetation's better.
to protect the.
Yeah, you know, use native species of flowers or different things that are deep-rooted. They tend to filter the runoff a little better.
Okay, the ugly one of sidewalks. Again, the commercial lot up there, I guess that was always a bone of contention with me from the other development. You're gonna have that up there. We need the wide street to accommodate that. And I guess, I can't help but feel that people that live at the lake would like to take a nice stroll to go get their evening meal or whatever. So I really would like to see if, I'm torn on whether it's a path or if it's a sidewalk. I guess if we're gonna make the other one do a sidewalk, I think conformity would be good, but I'd really like to see that at least loop up to that, up and around, follow Stony Point Drive, whether it's concrete or asphalt.
You're right. Has the precedent not already been set that we are requiring sidewalk up there since the Munger addition does have sidewalk? Then you're gonna have the proverbial sidewalk to nowhere again, then if we don't have sidewalk in the new development.
Your sidewalk would come across that north area, and then you'd have to cross over to the road to get to the trail.
So currently, we have sidewalk up on top, and Dennis, you have sidewalk and
Down
curb
below.
and gutter at your place. So we'd be sitting there with that bunch in, you know, you can
Trail
tell
in
where I'm
between.
coming from, of course, but
Bob, is a sidewalk a deal breaker if we said we want sidewalks instead of a trail? It's your development, and I know you have an idea what you want it to look like.
I guess when I look at it, I think you ruin it a little bit by going with sidewalks, but if you're gonna go to a 37-foot road, you're gonna ruin it anyway. So, as far as what I think the look should be of the place.
37-foot road.
Whatever.
Any other questions for him?
Do we, Mr. Chairman, are we gonna talk about, or as part of this vote, gonna include the proposal with the lot widths? I mean, we talked about that from the concern of, you know, the immediate variances. I mean, you know what's gonna happen, these lots are deeper than they are wider, so you're gonna have people wanting to build
Okay,
detached
so
garages.
going through the lot, what Mark's getting at is we have a minimum lot width of 75 feet. Some of these lots on one end of the lot is less than 75 feet, but a lot of the lots at the lake are pie shaped because of the dynamics of a lake. Jeff, real quick, explain, all of these lots are conforming lots inside our code because the average mean width is 75 feet. We might have a couple lots that have less than 75 feet at the road, but explain quickly how you measure the lot width.
I drew in where the ordinary high water mark is, because that's where, as was mentioned, anything lower than that is property of the lake. And then from there, I recalculated the area, and then found the mean length, and took the area divided by length, and I get the mean width. And for all of the lots, except for lot 9, they all had higher than the mean width of 75 feet. Lot 9 was around 68 and a half feet of mean width, so that was the only one that was.
But it met the minimum square footage.
Yeah, it was still well above the square footage.
Those square footages that are shown, though, do include below the high water mark?
I didn't when calculating the mean width. I redrew it in, and the new property lines kind of went with the ordinary high water mark around this area, but this lot still was above the minimum 9,000 square feet. In fact, I had it.
So the second half of Mark's question was, can you put a deed restriction that disallows a lot from being eligible for a variance? And that question I'll defer to Stanton.
Well, I think we can, like with a letter of assurance or whatever document, that the Plan Commission and City Council recommend be included as part of the approval process. I think we can put language in there that's recorded in the chain of title that says none of the, if that's the direction the Plan Commission wants, is that none of these lots be eligible to make application to the Board of Adjustment for any type of variance.
Is it too strict, and how can you administer that, Kenny? The hard part with that is all this stuff can be put in the titles and deeds, but when they walk up for a building permit in 35 years, nobody remembered.
But if it's recorded in the chain of title, before they buy that lot or buy that property, if they get any title work done, the title company's going to find it in the chain, and it's going to appear on the commitment policy.
And the width of the lot with your setbacks is what determines if you need a variance or not the square footage or how deep it is. Isn't that correct?
Depending on how the buildings are constructed, but a lot of variance requests are a result of side yard setbacks.
Well, in fact, I would dare say the vast majority of them are based upon your widths of the lot. So the square footage or how deep they are really is irrelevant relative to, again, the typical variances that the Board of Adjustment sees relative to, somebody wants to build onto their house or they want to put a detached garage on, immediately you're into the variance.
If we look at lot 10, for instance, it's 33 feet at the road there, which you're gonna have to push that significantly back in that lot before you can build a decent-sized structure.
And account for a driveway.
And another, going back to the question that whoever put to me about, or maybe it was you, Mark, that put to Pat, I think another place you could request that it be included, a restriction on seeking variances in the future, is on any covenants that Mr. Drake alluded to would be included as part of this development. You could ask that language be included in the covenants as well, because those will get recorded at the Register of Deeds office as well as anything this board approves.
Is it fair to the property owner to handcuff them right out of the chute?
Well, I think if that's the direction that the Plan Commission and City Council are going to go, I think it's only fair to the developer that when he's marketing these lots, people who are potential buyers know, if I buy this, I'm going to have to live with the zoning requirements and not be eligible to seek variance relief for anything. If that's the direction you choose, I'm not recommending one way or the other, but I think it's only fair to the developer that when he's marketing them, he can tell the potential buyers with a straight face, look, this is the hand you're being dealt if you buy this lot.
Would that be on those particular lots there? Or would that be on?
No, I think it would only be on the lots that's minimum width is less than 75 feet. I don't think it's fair that if I have a 75 or 100-foot lot, that I'm handcuffed any differently than someone else is anywhere in town. I can look and say, okay, if it's 60 foot on the tail end on the back side, the rear yard is 60 feet. We basically have approved a lot that's less than the minimum in width, but it's above the minimum in area.
I'd like to make another comment that I just realized this, but earlier tonight, we had a large, discussion about R1, R2, R3. And we had a lot of people here a month ago that didn't like the fact that we were putting R1 right next to R3. And if you look at this diagram, we have R1 right across from R3. So is that going to be a bone of contention? Another, are we going to revisit this issue?
What he's getting at there, Bob, is
Right across the
that
canal.
we normally try to buffer R3 with R2. in this particular development, it's, you know, it's not like we're coming in after R1 homes have already been built and then we're gonna rezone to R3. I mean here, it's the way the preliminary plan was drawn up and the way the developer wanted it drawn up. So my opinion is, yeah, we do have R1 across the channel from R3. Any of the R1 over on the Hidden Valley side is buffered by that wetland. The only area, you know, we have R2 at the bottom, up against Prairie Hills, which is probably R1. Yeah, we have R3 right next to R1, I guess John pointed out, right there in Block 2. The one thing, you know, I would hope that anyone who buys the lots out there understands what the zoning is around them. And you know, we're not doing it after the fact. We're doing it long before the fact. So, and again, you kind of look and go, it's someone's property and they want to develop it and they kind of want to have a little bit of their own flavor as to what they want to do with it. So we, believe it or not, we try to get close to that, but it doesn't always look that way. All right, anything else? Any other board members? With that, I'll close the public hearing if I haven't already. I have. Closed it again. And
I know with the
go ahead,
curb
Rhonda.
and- Sorry, with the curb and gutter issue, is there, I know the runoff that we're talking about, any chance of, with the curb and gutter actually dropping it into its own, and I know this sounds really crazy, but into its own holding pond, its own septic, or what am I trying to say, street retaining pond, and then it can be, you know, separate from the city?
Well, the purpose of curb and gutter is to manage the runoff from the street surface, of course, and actually kind of defines the edge of the road in some aspects. But once you channelize that water off the road, then that will trigger a larger need for detention ponds and, you know, different conveyance features for water discharging off of this development. So that's why, you know, contrary to our normal standards, if we go away from the curb, there's probably some benefits versus challenges with regard to that.
Right.
Not that they can't accommodate it with their design, but it will change how they propose their final design on this.
Right, but if those drains were dropping into one of these holding ponds, I mean, actually channeled to that underwater, or underground, I mean, is that just unrealistic? I'm just asking.
Well, it's not unrealistic. What it does is it requires those facilities to be much larger.
Any other questions? I have one question for Dennis. I see in the back. You know, one of the things, if you can come up there, or shoot you a microphone. The one thing we struggle with is, hey, we've got other developments around that do have curb gutter, maximum city, you know, the standard city streets. This is a development that we're looking at saying, okay, we're gonna stick with the 37-foot street. We're going to forego the curb and gutter possibly because we think it's a better way of moving the water through there. Your thoughts? You're a developer who developed to the south and did it the way you were told to do. Your thoughts on that? Because like Dan said, we're going to hear back from every other developer around and every future developer that's going to say, I want to do it that way too.
You're gonna put me on the hot seat, huh?
Put you on the hot seat.
Well, maybe I'll preface it like this. I think as a developer, you want to have and you need to have the ability to plan your property the way you'd like to plan it, because everybody has a vision for what their property should and what they'd like to have it look like. So I think that's important, and I did that. I still have a vision, and it's still coming to fruition. This is changing it. Can't deny this is changing. I did not plan to have a road up through my property, but I also know there's land to the north of me with no access, and through lots of discussion that came about. But my concern with Prairie Hills is that what I was required to do, and I spent a lot of money out there that this developer's not gonna have to spend. I spent a lot of money out there. Now, was it right? Probably not. I wish I didn't have curb and gutter on Prairie Hills Avenue. I think it would probably be a little more of a country rural setting if it didn't, but I did it. You can name every other developer in town that's had to do that. In this setting up there, it makes good sense listening to city engineer talk about how to control water and filter the water and all of that, and I think that's good. I think that makes sense, and I've listened just like you have, and I'm okay with that. Is it fair? Probably not. But does it make sense? Yeah, I guess it does. I'm open-minded. The one thing that I want in my development, and I can only dictate what happens to my north property line, but I do have the authority and the decision and the way that that road looks, how it's designed, the ultimate decision on that road, I have the control. That's in writing. I have to approve the design and everything about that road with boulevard trees and reseeding and pond restructuring. That all at some point is going to have to come to me, and we'll work together certainly. But I do have a say in what that road will look like. Kind of saying a lot of things here, but I'm okay if that's what the developer wants. But to that north property line, I want it to look the same. I want Prairie Hills to be the way I envisioned it to be. I want that road that's there to look like everything else in Prairie Hills. You spend a lot of money, and it's not, I would have loved to have had a lot of money. I could go and make all these improvements on day one, and it could have been done, but I'm not a wealthy person, and you do it as you can afford to do it. And now we're having to make some changes, and when they agreed and took the road, they agreed to pay the expense of the road and put all the boulevard trees on both sides and the sidewalk on both sides. And I want sidewalks up to my north property line. I don't want a trail joining Prairie Hills Avenue. I don't want sidewalks and all of a sudden you got a trail. The bike trail is one thing, but another trail coming down through it, I'm not in favor of that. But I do think we can bring 2 sidewalks up. And at some point in the back, I think we could do a crossover, do a transition, and go in and transition into a bike trail, walking trail, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'll work with them. And I'm certainly not going to dictate what they have to look like up there if it makes good sense, and it seems like it does, not to have curb and gutter. Yeah, you'll hear back from 6 or 7 other developers in town, and every developer in town has had to put curb and gutter and sidewalks, and every single one of us have had to do it, every one of them. And now you're letting one come in and not do it, so yeah, if you vote to not let him do it, let them do it. I'm not opposed to that, but, you know, you're going to have good rationale of why you didn't, so. I don't know, does that answer your question? Maybe
I think it
spoke
does.
too long
Nope,
here, but-
nope. No, it was something that when we look and go, we've got other developers in the area and you've got a new development, their opinion as to the land that abuts them and in this case moves through them is a
Pat,
concern us. Go ahead, Shane.
I do want to say one thing, and we as a staff are reviewing these things, like I said earlier, based on what's being proposed to us. We're not gonna, as a staff, either go forward wholesalely selling out what our obligations are through the ordinances and the policies of the city. I mean, so this is a request to change the normal cross-section of a street. So that's what we're considering here. We will continue to request and pursue curb and gutter, 37-foot wide streets and sidewalks, as we always do, but we also have to at least entertain these through this process for alternate design concepts. And so I won't say that we're not gonna have this come back forward, this type of development again. One thing we've discussed as a staff and beyond is actually wondering if a lake district is warranted that doesn't necessarily include a mandatory curb and gutter type of.
I've thought the same thing too. I've thought, you know, maybe we need a more clear definition of a
mean,
rural lot and
right.
an urban lot. You know, the rural lot could be an acre or more, or whatever it may be. That's something from the
Correct.
Plan Commission at a later date we'll have to flesh out a little bit.
Yep, and it's my goal as the director of the planning and zoning for the city staff is to review how prudent that is, if that's something that we think we need for the city to have a new development area that would, around the lake specifically, that would change our typical design. We're gonna do that, but we're not gonna do it quickly or as a knee-jerk reaction to this development. It's going to have a lot of forethought, discussion, and input from the public before that would ever come to fruition. But that may be something you'll see come from our staff in the future.
One last thing, Shane, just for the general public's knowledge. Shortly, we'll take a vote on the acceptance of the resolution 2015-34 with the items that we listed and anything else we listed. Explain what the process is for the developer as he moves forward.
Okay, so whatever provisions are brought forward through this vote will be included in their preliminary plan. Then what they have to do is take that and incorporate all the provisions that are presented to them and challenges and come forward with a final plan. And we'll have a development agreement that highlights these items that they need to sign, and ultimately the city signs off then on the through the development agreement and the final plat, how this facility is gonna function and what this, ultimately, you know, the city has to take on the public side of this, the streets, the water, the sewer. So we need to make sure that all those things are done correctly and are suitable for us to take over and maintain. So that's our
those will
goal.
come to you in the form of a final plan?
Final plans and a development agreement, correct.
Okay, so just to restate
Pat.
restate your position on this, relative to the curb and gutter versus the ditch. You feel that this is a very unique one-off exception because of the lay of the land here, and that curb and gutter is not practical in this situation, or you're saying that the ditch drainage is gonna have the same effect, or is the ditch direction actually better in this particular application?
Well, it was a three-faceted question. I'll try to answer it neutrally, but in this instance, it is a unique request. I don't know that I could say that the curb and gutter would have the benefit that it would normally have in any other development. Because really that's to convey, you know, a public street. And in this case, this is a public street, but by in effect of having this ditch system, that does add some type of water quality control and controlled runoff that's different than a standard street. So it does fit this particular site better because the site tends to drain directly to the lake or other areas instead of collecting it. In other words, we're not collecting it and running it into another whole nother neighborhood, which that's really what curb and gutter controls, how things are collected and where the water runs eventually. But in this case, it's going almost directly to the lake, so it's kind of a difficult question to answer, but that's my reasoning in saying that curb and gutter is not critical in this instance.
Can I just clarify one more
Yeah,
thing,
go ahead.
Pat? You asked me for, and I don't know, on the curb and gutter on Prairie Hills, I would like to see curb and gutter on Prairie Hills. That's the way the development was started, and I would prefer not to have a mix match of some curb and gutter and then some not. I'd like to see curb and gutter continued on the new road going up, a sidewalk coming up to it on both sides and sidewalk going up. So that is my vision of what my develop look like, even though it's been altered some, and I've agreed to do that for various reasons. I still want to maintain that same look. So the developer north can, if whatever you approve today, he can do whatever he wants up there based on what his likes and dislikes are.
Yeah, and Dennis, I think item number 16, where we put in, if I'm not correct, Shane, the final approved preliminary plan shall be revised to exclude any development within Prairie Hills Development Second Edition. A revised preliminary plan for Prairie Hills Second Edition shall be submitted and show the location and the layout of Stony Point Drive. So basically, we put that in there, that item number 16. As Stony Point Drive goes through Prairie Hills, when we say 37 feet, no curb and gutter, that does not apply to the stretch that goes, because we knew there was an agreement that you have with those developers that may be contrary to what we're doing in that actual development.
That's my intention with having that in number 16 in there, yes.
All right, any other questions from the board for anyone? With that, I'll ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I'd like to attempt a motion. A motion that we approve Resolution 2015-34 with the exceptions that we have 37-foot streets and sidewalks on both sides. Place a ban on variances on lots less than 75 feet and include that ban in any covenant that those lots contain. And also that we recommend that the city council look very strongly at a north lake access for the channel.
Do I have a second? Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. McGuire. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Any old business? New business. We had a discussion. Can we carry that discussion item into our next meeting on the home occupation regulations? Anybody have a problem with that? We're not even going to open it. No executive session. I need a motion and a second to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mrs. Johnson. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.